Introduce the moderator of today. So the first one is Dr. Chris Heckerty. He is technical fellow with the MITRE Corporation, where he has worked mainly on aviation application of GNSS since 1992. He served the ION previously as editor of the navigation from 1997 to 2006, and as president in 2008-2009. He was recipient of the 2005 ION Kepler Award and is currently the chair of the Program Management Committee of RTCA and co-chair of the RTCA Special Committee 159. He is co-editor and co-author of the textbook Understanding GPS, GNSS Principle and Application, and fellow of the ION and IEEE. So please, Chris, join me and receive the certificate of the ION in recognition of your contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
The second moderator is Dr. Avila Rodriguez. He is head of the Galileo Second Generation System Security Service Office at the Galileo Program Department of the European Space Agency, which he joined in 2010. Between 2003 and 2010, he was research associate at the Institute of Geodesy and Navigation at the University of the Federal Armed Forces in Munich. During his research, he has been a key contributor to the international interoperability and compatibility efforts leading to the Galileo Signal Plan, supporting the Galileo program in numerous working groups of the European Space Agency, the European Commission, and the Galileo Joint Undertaking. Dr. Avila Rodriguez received his PhD in aerospace engineering in signal design from the University of the Federal Armed Forces in Munich. Technical expertise and interest include satellite navigation system, space segment and ground segment design, system security applied to GNSS, signal structure for satellite navigation, GNSS receivers, spreading cone design, and performance. Dr. Avila Rodriguez is recipient of the ION 2008 Parkinson Award and holds the ION 2010 Early Achievement Award. He is an IEEE member since 2012 and an ION Fellow since 2020. He received the European Inventor Award 2017 from the European Patent Office in Research category, as well as the Cross of Aeronautical Merit with White Decoration from the Spanish government in 2019 for his contribution to Galileo. So congratulations, Jose, and please receive the ION certificate for your contribution. So thank you very much to the moderator and to the participant, and I leave you the floor to the moderator.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the ION 2023. First of all, I apologize for the long introduction. I didn't have a chance to shorten the CV. I'll make some announcements just before, and just also to say I'm very honored and pleased to be co-chairing, co-moderating this panel with my good friend and colleague, Chris Heckerty. I guess you are also looking forward to the status panel this morning just as much as I am. And some announcements just to make before we start. So photos are allowed if you have them for private use, as you can see basically on the leaflets of the ION. But please put the flash mode off so that you don't disturb anybody around. The other thing is I ask you to please set your mobile phones to vibrate. The presentations are going to be recorded. So if you have to really say something to your neighbor and you're too loud, you will be recorded, and this can be used against you in court. Today, unfortunately, we're going to be missing our Chinese colleagues. There was on the program a presentation from Beidou. They couldn't make it this morning, but the presentation is available offline, and you can view it at any time in the coming days. And in terms of the planning for this morning, so the plan is we'll start right now. We'll make a break around 10:05 just to align to the rest of presentations going on this morning. We'll resume at 10:35. So we'll start with GPS. We'll follow by Galileo. We'll go then with QZSS, break, and then we move with KPS and NavIC. And we'll be calling upon stage everyone one by one, if time allows, At the very end of every presentation, we'll have one or two questions. And if that's not the case, that's not a problem, because at the very end of the morning, we'll call everybody on stage and we'll have time for an inquisitorial interrogation where you can keep all your questions and ask them anytime at the very end when everyone is here. So not to further delay anymore, I'd like to introduce the presenter for the GPS status, Mr. Corel de la Pena, who is the Program Executive Officer for Military Communications and Positioning, Navigation and Timing, Space Systems Command in Los Angeles Air Force, California. As the PEO, he manages and oversees development, production, delivery, maintenance of critical and innovative communications and PNT systems worth more than $20.3 billion. He's responsible for multi-service, multinational systems, as well as the training and equipment of more than 1,800 military and civilian personnel. We are looking forward to your presentation.
All right, so good morning. I'm Del Delpina. I go by Del from Los Angeles Air Force Base. I'm representing the Department of Defense and the United States Space Force today. I'd like to thank ION for hosting this great conference. This is my second one. Multi-GNSS is an important topic for all of us. I think this is an outstanding forum, especially with the panel members you're going to hear from today, myself included, on where we are in the fielding, sustainment, and modernization of just worldwide PNT capabilities. So thanks to ION for hosting and inviting me. I'd like to thank my fellow panel members, all of our partners in the audience, international, our industry partners, our FFRDCs, and our civil community, because it takes a village to go far in this business, and we definitely have a village in PNT. Okay, next slide, please. Here's what I'll talk about today. I'm going to take about 30 minutes, and we'll see if we have time at the end for some questions. Slide. So I think many of the speakers have highlighted this. I mentioned it last night at the plenary session, but it's 2023 is the 50th year of GPS's operations, fielding, definition of a program. Dr. Parkinson is here in the front row, sir. Raise your hand. One of our founding fathers, first program manager. One of the interesting things, Dr. Parkinson, I'll share with you is that as part of their tradition, as Dr. Parkinson, then Colonel Parkinson, responsible for the first block GPS launch, as the active duty colonel, he was a launch commander for that first launch. Since that day, every single GPS launch, the active duty 06 responsible for that new block is the mission launch commander. And our last launch was GPS 3 SV6 in January. No difference. It was Colonel Jung Ha. He was that crew commander for that launch, and I'll tell you, it was not a go all the way. We hadn't launched a GPS satellite in the United States since the summer of 21. That was GPS 3 SV5. In a year and a half, and now we're launching GPS 3 SV6. Colonel Jung Ha had been in the job for about, 6-8 months. Stepped up, did all the mission rehearsals, and that day, with the Secretary of the Air Force present down at Cape Canaveral, had an anomaly on the pad with like an hour to go. Right? His crew had rehearsed all the possible contingencies. As a matter of fact, the night before was their last mission rehearsal, and Colonel House said, of all the things that could go wrong, what do we think the one that could happen tomorrow would be? And it was that anomaly scenario, and they kicked it in, made the call, and they launched an hour later. So that's your tradition, and we will continue that, sir, as long as the United States Space Force is launching GPS satellites. Dr. Getting did a lot of work with Raytheon on the payload development for the initial GPS radio nav payloads, but also was the founder of the Aerospace Corporation in 1960. When I say it takes a village, the United States Department of Defense, Air Force, Space Force, we don't maintain, we don't operate, we don't develop GPS capability without our FFRDC mission partners. That's primarily Aerospace, MITRE, MIT Lincoln, and RAND. I mean, they are our workhorse as an FFRDC taking on the hardest problems we have in modernization. Thanks to our aerospace brethren. And then Dr. Reeson at the Naval Research Lab did a lot of the initial thought on NTS 1 and 2. Back in the 60s and 70s, we're about to launch NTS 3. So it's been 50 years since we've had a NTS launch. NTS 3 will launch in 2024. All right, slide. Talk a little bit about my portfolio. In the Space Force, from a DoD warfighter perspective, the fundamental capabilities that you need to conduct a battle is to network and to move with precision. For those of you who've been through the war colleges and studied Clausewitz, fundamental warfighting is maneuver. If you can outmaneuver your enemy and put the strength of your forces on your enemy's weakest point of attack, you've outmaneuvered your enemy. In today's battlefield, you don't do that without networking and without precision, which is why in the Space Force, both those missions are combined under me. It's military communications and precision. On the acquisition side, 7 ACAP-1 programs, 19 satellites in various phases of production, both on common PNT. On orbit, we fly 38 PNT satellites, 34 SATCOM satellites, support multiple users on the ground. And our triad capability is making sure that the space vehicles, the ground systems, and the user equipment are all synced. That's the responsibility of that PNT enterprise. All right, slide. Rough shot of our OV1. It covers both the MIL-SATCOM and the PNT. It shows the programs that are currently on orbit being sustained, the current satellite programs are in various phases of modernization, production, development. It shows our ground systems and our user terminals. What I'll highlight for you is that this is the OV1 today, primarily in the MEO orbit, medium Earth orbit. That's GPS. That's U.S. GPS in medium Earth orbit, flying those 38 satellites, of which 31 are used to calculate the solution. And then in geostationary, that's 22,000 miles. Currently, that's for the DoD, that is our exquisite communication systems. That's secure communications, tactical communications, narrowband, wideband, and then polar comm coverage. That's the enhanced polar system, of which we have EPSR flying today. And then we have a international cooperative program with Space Norway, who's hosting a EPSR payload on one of their Space Norway communication satellites for polar coverage. That's the snapshot with the user equipment as of today. And what I'll highlight later in this briefing is that in order to expand the capabilities, in order to leverage commercial, especially in proliferated LEO, in order to get after more of a sustained, focused presence for anti-jamming theaters, we're going to expand our capabilities in U.S. GPS to both to cover and leverage proliferated LEO and operations in GEO. That's the future. All right, slide. All right, slide. So there is nothing in the modern world, I would challenge. Maybe the speaker last night about those natural air vehicles. Maybe birds are the only thing that aren't touched by GPS. Precision, navigation, and timing to move anywhere. One of the reasons why COM and PNT is synced in the military, because all of our frequency hopping anti-jam radios depend on GPS time. Time must be precise. Business transactions anywhere around the world, if you move money, it's got to be on the same sync clock. There is nothing, I would argue, in the modern world that isn't touched by PNT and in most other respects, satellite communications. And that 50 years, we're proud of that. From the Department of Defense, Air Force, Space Force, our civil mission partners, Department of Transportation, the FAA, we are proud of the fact that for the past 50 years, we have been the leader. We will continue to invest in resources and talent to do so, to ensure we maintain the accuracy, integrity, availability, and continuity that the world has grown to depend on. My kids on cell phones, your kids on cell phones, they go outside, they turn that thing on, that GPS better be there. You can depend on it. Our warfighters, same dependency. Most people from out of Colorado flew in over the past couple of days. Every single pilot depends on it. And we're proud of the fact that we have maintained that standard. All right, slide. That 50 years, capability has evolved in that 50 years. We're picking up this slide with GPS-2s. So this is like late 70s, early 80s. Early 70s was the launch I talked about that Colonel Parkinson, Dr. Parkinson led. But we've gone through 6 versions of the GPS satellite vehicles, 2A, 2R, 2M, 2F. And then since 2012, shifted to GPS-3s. In 2021, completed the production of all of the GPS-3s, all of them. We've launched 6. GPS-3 SB7 will launch in 2024. And we'll pull the other 3, which are done, sitting in storage, ready to go. We'll pull those out in 25 and launch them. Most of those capability evolution is really enhancements in clocks and in power, especially GPS-3 and the GPS-3F. GPS-3F, that contract was awarded in 2018. Increased power, increased civil signals. For the military, it's really addressing the jamming threat. That's both to the DoD and to the civil community. We got to increase our power. We got to get our terminals and our antennas in a synchronized function to really counter the threat. And it really takes all 3 to get after that high precision we're talking about. And in the DoD, it's the precision which allows us to have a business case in which we look at 1 weapon per target. And that's pretty efficient when you need GPS and comm to do that. On the ground side, had 3 major ground blocks, OCS, AEP around the mid-2000s, 2006, 2007, mostly for obsolescence and cyber and IT advancements. 2008 was the award of the OCX contract. And then we just awarded OCX-3F, which is the ground system we need to operate the GPS-3F satellite, which launched in 26. So that's the evolution on the ground. I'll talk more about OCX in a further slide. It's been a long journey, but we're about to start FQT on OCX. That's all the formal qual testing. That's all the testing that we can do to certify all of the contractual requirements in the lab against sophisticated simulators that were developed by the OCX program. Once we get through the FQT on OCX, we do the site integration at Schriever, train the crews, do all the testing with live assets that we couldn't do in the lab, and we're supposed to transition the whole thing to operations late 24, early 25. And the next will be OCX-3F, field it in time to support the GPS-3F launches in 26. And then on the user equipment, since the last time I spoke to you last year, tremendous achievements in the user equipment. The last time I was here, we had just finished the certification of the military GPS user equipment Increment 1 ground card. We certified that. The Army has funded integration in their 23 and 24 budgets. They are buying hundreds of thousands of these cars to integrate into their ground vehicles, their strikers, the Marine Corps into the joint light tactical vehicles. And then MGU Increment 2, which is the smaller form factor, has to maintain the power supply independently. So think of MGU Increment 2 as the bigger card, really designed for anything with an engine, whether that be a Jeep, a truck, an airplane, or a ship. And then think Increment 2 as the smaller form factor, which has to maintain all that anti-jam performance. But the most strenuous requirement we have is maintaining it with the current battery load that a ground operator has for a handheld device. Right? Special operators, if you're in the middle of a gunfight, we've heard the feedback. You don't have time to be changing batteries in the middle of a gunfight. So in addition to closing the link, we have a driving requirement to make sure that we operate within the battery limitations of all the handheld devices. So last time I spoke, we've launched GPS 3 SV6. We're about to enter FQT on OCX. And then on the ground equipment, completed the requirements verification of the ground. And then in April, we completed the lab verification of all the airborne maritime assets. And those maritime assets will go into lead platform integration starting now. Okay, so our monetization perspective, these are the programs, we're executing them. We anticipate fielding everything by about 2030. All right, slide. Use civil signals, L1, L2, L5, L1C. I'll highlight L5. So this is the new signal for safety of life for civil aviation. Very, very important to the civil community. I would say that's equivalent to the M-code users for anti-jam for the military. I talked about the M-code capability is at 24 SV satellites. We currently have 24 M-code anti-jam capable satellites on orbit today. For L5, if 17, the launch of GPS 3 SV7 will make it 18, so that's an IOC capability of 18 satellites worldwide for L5. We'll launch 3 more GPS 3s. We'll start launching the 3Fs in 2026, but the intent is the L5 signal is going to be available from space worldwide with 18 SVs and the transition of OCX in 2025. So we'll have an L5 capability worldwide available in 25-26. All right, slide. This is actually a picture of the launch at the Cape. That's SV6. But 8 o'clock in the morning, one of our crew was standing outside and took that picture. That's what a launch looks like at sunrise at Cape Canaveral. It's a pretty awesome sight. And those of you who've been there, the earth shakes. You don't hear anything but that rocket for about 10 miles. Right? When they launched the Cape, they closed down all traffic like 2 hours before the launch, clear the airspace, right? And the East Coast waits for that rocket to go off. That was our 6th launch on a SpaceX Falcon 9, the 6th. GPS 3 SV1 in 2019 was the first Department of Defense satellite to be launched on a SpaceX Falcon in 2019. Now we have 6, and I'll tell you, for the SpaceX partners in the crowd, you are a trusted provider. Back in 2014, when we weren't sure if that whole reusable booster thing was going to work, well, you proved it can. And now, it's the primary provider, at least for the past 6 launches, it's one of the primary providers for GPS. And we're looking at other launch vehicles as they mature as well. All right, slide. Current state of health. 38 satellites are in orbit, 31 sat healthy. Baseline constellation is 24, so our accuracy to that filter is based on those 31 sat healthy satellites. Average URE, 47.4 centimeters. That's like 18 inches. And our best day, and this is in family where I briefed you last year. In family where I briefed you last year. Best day in 2023 so far, 33.4 centimeters. That's like 13 inches. For military purposes, any weapon we fire, I guarantee you has a blast radius greater than 18 inches. We spent a lot of effort making sure that we're good on the other aspects. Reliability, availability, continuity, and the integrity of our signals are important to us. Right. That's where the threat is. That's spoofing, that's the spoofing, that's the jamming, that's the cyber attacks. We intend, from the DoD's perspective, that you can rely, the world can continue to rely on U.S. GPS as long as we're running it. All right, slide. this is a snapshot of everything I just talked about, but what it highlights are all the programs that are currently approved and funded. So I know it's an eye chart, but this slide will be in the leave behind package for you. We have on contract 10 GPS-3Fs. The contract is structured to buy 12 more, but we bought the first 10. Those 10 that are on contract will deliver by the end of 29. OCX transition 2025, OCX 3F will be available for the first launch of 3F in 26. And then we intend to finish the user equipment programs in the next 2 years. I told you on the user equipment programs, Inc. 1. On Inc. 1, we have finished all the lab testing. It's out for integration, both on the Army host platforms and the lead platforms. For increment 1, there's 2 years of integration money left in the Space Force budget. After that, we turn all of our attention, all our focus to increment 2. And that's to get through the final CDR in increment 2, which is this quarter. Of the 3 vendors that we have on increment 2, one has held a CDR, the other will hold their CDR this quarter, the other will hold their CDR when they're ready. We'll spin the ASIC chips in the spring of 24, and after that, it's integration to the handheld device, and then handheld device is already on contract. All right, slide. Okay, I think we're on slide. You want me to do it? Hold on. Yeah. Never let POs hit buttons on laptops. Okay. That's why I always say next slide. I've done this. I'm constantly hitting the wrong buttons up here, right? Okay. So here, just going to walk the dog in a little more detail. So here's GPS 3, all SVCs launched, set healthy. The first GPS 3 SV1, when we launched it, the program team, the development team, was responsible for all the early operations to get it to orbit, turn on all the payloads, and that took like 60 days. The last 2, SV5 and SV6, those took like a week. So a lot of lessons learned, but a lot of comfort based on experience that we know what we're doing when it comes to launching the final 3. And then they're the 4 that are in storage. SV7 will launch in 24. All right, slide. Here's 3F. Next generation brings RMP, higher power, more enhanced anti-jam, a search and rescue payload in partnership with the Canadians, other payloads, other arrays. We're watching closely the NTS-3 experiment. That's the experiment which I talked about going to GEO. There are a handful of experiments that we're watching closely, and if they mature, if they're at the right level for integration, we're going to consider breaking into the 3F production line to inject new enhancements coming out of the experiment. So there's always that risk of that, what's called that valley of death between technology development and fielding to transition. We have a sweet spot now for the next 10 to 12 3F vehicles that are on the production line, that if it's the right time and the right experiment, if it's the right maturity, the right TRL for both technology and for manufacturing, we're watching a handful of them, and if they mature right, we're going to break into the production line to keep evolving those PNT capabilities. All right, slide. Talked about OCX. FQT, man, FQT, really proud of that team. Really proud of that government, FFRDC, contractor team. Come a long way in the past year to get ready for FQT. But those of you who know in this development business, once you get through FQT and the system works, you're integrating and you're out of the lab. And you'll find out real quick what kind of system that you have. And we have focused on nothing but quality on OCX for the past year. All right, slide. Talk about the user equipment. On the airborne side and the maritime side, that is Inc. 1. The lead platforms are the B-2 bomber, the Navy's DDG destroyer, the Arleigh Burke class, and the Marine Corps and the Army. They are integrating on their vehicles. All right, slide. I'm going to talk about partnerships a lot. The next era of capability is going to be defined by the Space Warfare Analysis Center, the SWAC, about the follow-on PNT architecture. That schedule slide that I showed you, that's a snapshot of what's funded today, the existing capabilities we're going to feel over the next 5-8 years. But what's coming next will be defined by the force design. And our intent is, you've heard General Gutlein say this in public, that we're going to buy what we can, and he means like if there's commercial capability that we can leverage, we're going to buy it. If we can exploit what we have, and that includes using existing capabilities differently, leveraging our international partners differently, and then only acquiring these exquisite military solutions where we really, really need them. So do we need an anti-jam capability everywhere in the world 24/7? Maybe, maybe not. But being able to disaggregate, looking at other orbits, looking at other phenomenologies, looking at other levels of capability through commercial, international, and maintaining that trusted accuracy, integrity, availability, and continuity. Those are the variables we're going to touch on in the future architecture, and that all starts after we're done with the programs I just briefed. With this partnership, this industry, international partnership, along with industry. All right, slide. I got backup slides on each one of these, but I'm going to go through these really fast. So from the DoD's perspective, we're really interested in augmenting our PNT solution. So we held a reverse industry day in June. We had 40 companies come in. We held one-on-ones with those companies, one-on-ones with the government reps, in which they told us, if you want to improve that 4 variable that we just talked about in any area, these were concepts that industry partners shared with us. So we're looking to continue and fund several of those. We have another reverse industry day in MilSatCom scheduled for December, January. And I'll talk about the next 3 programs in the following slides. So give me the next slide, please. Talk about NTS-3, L3 Harris is the prime. That's a snapshot of the bus and the payload sitting down in Florida. But it's the transition of DoD GPS capabilities into the GEO orbit. Over 100 different experiments are going to go on there. But one of the things we're also watching, in addition to the satellite capability, is the interface, what they're calling a software-defined terminal. So what takes a long time in the DoD to field new capability is that once the receivers are available, to go and retrofit and backfit hundreds of aircraft, thousands of vehicles, takes time. But terminals in the future are software defined so that you can upgrade those terminals with minimal hardware changes to include the interface to the cockpit through a software defined architecture. That's going to be the future, which is going to cut down the amount of time it takes to actually integrate all these new capabilities. So that's what we're watching on NTS-3. Going to GEO, slide. Department of Defense, also expanding into proliferated LEO through the Space Development Agency under Derek Tournier. Just launched Tranche 1 on the comm side. Tranche 2 will host, is planned for Tranche 2 in a proliferated LEO, which at the end state is going to be hundreds of satellites, both comm and PNT enabled. But starting in Tranche 2, with that first launch in the 2026 timeframe, is the intent to host a low-cost, lower-power PNT payload. All right, and then slide. Blending solution is going to be the future. So within DoD, we're looking at changing policies to start exploring how we can best blend the U.S. GPS signal with other signals, international signals, commercial signals. We're looking to stand up our own integration lab for PNT, in which we tell those vendors who have a solution, come to our lab, and we'll blend your solution, and we'll measure the performance. So that's also something we're looking at for 26. All right, slide. global utility, uninterrupted service, strength through partnerships. That's how we get that enduring resilience. That's my last slide. I think I got 2 minutes for any questions you may have. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. De La Pena. Actually, we're going to move to the next one, and we'll keep your questions and think of very tough ones, and we'll ask Mr. De La Pena back to the stage after the break for the panel discussion. We'll move next to our next global system, and we'll have representatives from the Galileo program. We'll actually have 2 speakers here. The first will be Mr. Eric Schotter from the European Commission. Eric is an engineer and an MBA who hasn't updated his bio in 19 years, but he's been working more than 30 years experience in satellite navigation in GNSS in both the private and public sectors. He's managed EGNOS system tests, EU R&D and GNSS user segment, and also the ARAIM EU-US bilateral group, amongst other duties. He was recently appointed deputy head for the EU GNSS programs. Eric, you can come on up and we'll get you started. While I introduce the second speaker who will continue after Eric begins, and that's Miguel Mantega, who's the Galileo second generation project manager inside the Directorate of Navigation of ESA, the European Space Agency. Mr. Mantega obtained his master's degree in science at the University of Valencia. He also obtained an international executive MBA from the IE Business School. He moved to the ESA Galileo team in 2001. Throughout the last 21 years, he's developed his career in the Galileo program in a wide variety of positions, covering all areas of the Galileo environment. So welcome, Eric and Miguel.
Thank you very much, Chris, for the kind introduction. Always a pleasure to be back here and try to share with you the progress on the side of Galileo and have also the update of all our friends in other constellations. So what we'll cover today is, I think, a kind of feat, because 23 was quite busy for us. We didn't kill lions, we didn't slay hydras, we didn't clean stables, but I think we stole a few golden apples, and I'll try to share a bit with you the progress of Galileo over this thrilling year. First challenge is always service and our users. So service first, we have a lot of work ongoing to make sure that based on the technical capabilities we deploy, we also have very solid teams that operate, maintain, and really secure our service provision layer. So thanks to our agency, USPA, and our operator for Galileo, SpaceOpal, I think we managed to demonstrate that even though we have not reached the FOC capability yet, we have excellent performance, well above what we commit at this stage, because as always, we want to be sure that we can deliver on our commitments. So it's a gradual approach, but I think we are really happy with the accuracy. Obviously, clocks are key, and we'll see in different places of this presentation that it continues to be a thrust for our R&D activities. But also we have seen that in terms of availability and other performance, we are fairly stable, and I think it's a very good development. With full transparency, we publish still our quarterly reports on a regular basis. Our users seem to react very positively to this, and we see still growing adherence to our satisfaction surveys. So we'll try to keep up the good work and be at the level of expectations that are out there. And we are still quite active in this user consultation platform to take feedback and plan ahead what we can do better in the future. In terms of infrastructure, I'll remain rather short on this. Miguel will have a lot of more details in his presentation, but we continue building up the infrastructure, as I said, towards the FOC, our final operational capabilities. We still have a number of things happening. One key aspect happening this year, later on this year and early next year, is the deployment of a next major ground segment release. with a focus of improving cyber. We are all living in a world where cyber threats are growing, so that's certainly one of the elements we are addressing. And also, this release will focus on delivering on our governmental service, PRS. So this is happening later on this year. We are in the final stages of preparing this major migration. We are also strengthening our ground network of stations, so we are increasing the number of telemetry stations to have more capacity to link with the constellation. So we have a new station in Kourou, and then we are also deploying new sensor stations. Notably, one came live in Wallis, in the middle of the Pacific, which is an area where we didn't have stations, and it's really helpful for many aspects of our services. And then we are looking into one additional site in Antarctica as well. And then obviously the second generation is also moving full speed. Miguel will have all the proof of this in his presentation, and a lot going on in this domain of the second generation. If I do twice the slide, I will be there the whole morning. Next slide on access to space. As you know, Galileo has not launched satellites for some time. It's not a news. I was here last year and I said the same thing. So you know the situation that I summarized last year, where we were expecting to have last two launches from Kourou using Soyuz launcher for our last 4 satellites until the FOC declaration. Given the war in Ukraine, this was cancelled, and now we are really looking into options. The plan is to go with future launches based on Ariane 6 launcher, but if you have followed a bit the file, you will have seen that this launch readiness is being shifted. So we expect now a maiden flight in the course of 2024, and that means the launch manifest is quite crowded as well. So we are looking into options to look to see what could be done in terms of launches in 24 in out of EU solutions, and we are quite active in this area. Obviously, this requires governmental agreements to support and ensure that wherever we launch the satellites, they are protected with the level required for satellites that, as you have seen in the previous briefing, are sensitive elements. In terms of improvements on the signal, 2 major things happening here. The first one is completed. I had announced last year that we are bringing up this improvement of our navigation message, this so-called iNav navigation message that is in 2 of our signals. So here we introduce new features that bring additional elements for users to be able to get the first fix more rapidly than with the current E5 signals, and also operate in more severe disturbed environments with interference. So we introduced this root Solomon code for forward error correction, additional capabilities, and then another synchronization pattern that helps us to this faster time to first fix, as well as other additional reduced clock and ephemeris data. This has been deployed over the last few months throughout the constellation. You might have seen a number of NAGUs informing that some satellites will be taken offline and online. This is what we are doing through the whole constellation, and this is now fully available. The other thing happening is on our 2 satellites that you remember are satellites that are not in nominal orbits. We use those satellites quite a bit now for testing purpose and try to dry run a few of the ideas we have for the future. And that's exactly what's happening now on these 2 satellites. We have deployed, reconfigure our NSGU, our generative payload, to broadcast a new pilot signal on the E5 frequency, with the objective of testing this for faster and simplified acquisition of this signal. Currently we are collecting user feedback, receiver manufacturer feedback. There has been a workshop with manufacturers, and we expect to take a program decision on this knowing that in the longer term, in the context of second generation, we'll have full-blown pilot signals on all our frequencies. But that could be an interesting gap filler until the G2 constellation is fully deployed. High accuracy. You might remember last year it was our challenge ahead, this high accuracy service declaration. That's a service we really feel makes a big difference. That's why I was talking about golden apples before, because I think that's one of them. And we have made it. We have declared our initial service capability in early 23, early this year, and now you see on the plot there, the green smudge there is basically what you get compared to the blue dispersion in terms of accuracy if you process our high accuracy signal. So it's quite impressive based on a very limited set of stations that are our baseline sensor stations. But obviously, as I was saying before, we are trying to ever improve. So we are also looking into a second phase of high accuracy service to bring up performance, to be more available, to also cover the entire globe. As I was saying before, we have some limitation in the current ground segment because, for example, the Pacific region, we had very little stations able to support such a HAS service. And now we will be able, and we are addressing a full global coverage for Galileo HAS. So we have had 2 days, HAS days, in Madrid this year, where this service was discussed with the user communities, with the manufacturers, where we shared information, and we also collected feedback again to look ahead. On another front, we are also quite active in bringing up this new service called the Emergency Warning Support Service, where we are bringing this tool to the civil protection authorities in our member states, where we see that there's a high demand for an additional capability of broadcasting emergency notifications to the population. And this is what we are doing here. So we showcased the concept in France, in Germany, in Luxembourg earlier this year with recreating actual catastrophe that happened in these different regions, like plant explosion, chemical plant explosion in France, or floods in Germany. And with the civil protections, local authorities, the rescue teams, we had these demonstrations with really excellent results when within 30 seconds to 1 minute we had information to all the users with directions given to users and refresh on the situation. So we have an excellent feedback on this, and also a lot of activities with Japan notably, but also Australia and other countries are interested to bring join forces on a single standard for this future EWSS service. And this is coming back as a full service in 2025. Search and rescue. Search and rescue, we are contributing a lot. We have discussed this before, and Galileo is one of the main contributors to COSPAS-SARSAT in terms of detection capabilities. Also, we have introduced this returning service that we discussed before, where we confirm and acknowledge to the users that we have received their distress call. Now we are looking ahead because we see that COSPAS-SARSAT is a bit losing ground in this environment, very dynamic of search and rescue, where we see a lot of private companies bringing new ideas on the table, and I think looking in the right directions in terms of what's the future of search and rescue. And as Galileo, we are bringing a number of ideas on how to remotely activate beacons in case there's a situation where the aircraft is not responding, for example. Also increase the two-way communication capabilities so that rescue teams can really coordinate with the rescue operations with the person in danger. And then also other solutions like distress position sharing, which really distributes the location to have faster access to the person in distress. So we are quite active on this, bringing standards on the table of COSPAS-SARSAT, also in EuroCAE RTCA. And we have also this year introduced a new station in the Indian Ocean region to complete our search and rescue coverage. Spoofing, as said before, robustness is key for all of us, including for the civilian users. So one other golden apple that we are pursuing this year and for which we expect to declare service early next year is this open service navigation message authentication. It brings a first layer of robustness, protecting against spoofing. And we have transitioned to our final signal earlier this year in July. So the signal is there. It's described. There's an ICD published. It's fully available. So please, you can start to use it. Declaration as a service with commitments, as I said, early 24. And we see quite a strong demand from many communities, many application domains that get back to us requesting access to this and support in the development of the introduction of this service. As I was saying, and my predecessor here said a lot about the importance of GPS in the military domain. Galileo for our governmental users is also key, and that's really one of the main focus of this year, where we are really targeting to go to our initial operational capability in this area. We are doing joint testing with member states. We expect to bring the new PRS signal live very early in 24, and we are targeting this initial capability also in 24, early 25. So that's really an important development this year. And as an aside, you know that there's a number of countries that have expressed willingness to join the Galileo program to have access to our PRS signal. Norway is the most advanced in terms of where we stand in negotiations, and we are getting close to reach an agreement. So that's coming up nicely. G2G, I'll let Miguel cover second generation. He has a lot on this, but basically I think we have a second generation that is ambitious, that was ambitious on paper, that covered many of the things you brought up before on GPS, and not only on paper now, and Miguel will show that this is an actual reality materializing now. Looking still behind this, we have quite strong R&D activities ongoing. Clocks, I was saying, new clocks and sovereign procurement for clocks is an important aspect. We are looking also quite strongly on synergies between communication and navigation capabilities. We are looking into the future of cryptography, notably quantum, but also other types of cryptography. Governmental services, there's a strong push from governmental services beyond what we offer today with PRS in many domains, not only pure navigation and timing. So that's a thrust for our R&D. And then, obviously, last but far from being the least, low Earth orbit solutions. We strongly believe that there is a future in this. ESA has a lot of initiatives to jumpstart this. We are looking in the European Commission at what could be a future program to complement Galileo with a LEO layer in the future, opening another arena of usage. And then finally, again, we come back to our users because they are still central for us. Quite a good sign in terms of adoption that continues with a strong market. We are also in full contact with the many user communities through our agency, EUSPA. And we have an EU Space Week coming up soon in Sevilla in November, where all the developments in the EU space programs will be presented, so you are fully welcome. And I leave it to this and let Miguel continue with the systems.
Thank you, Eric. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's always a pleasure to be back again here in ION. think it's my 22nd Ion, so it's really proud to be here. And we didn't coordinate because I like to improvise in the presentations, but I love the golden apple metaphor of Eric. It describes very well if you ask yourself, what is happening in Europe on a daily basis? It's basically this. In ESA, we are the Newtons of space. We have brilliant minds in commission and USPA that generate golden apples on a monthly basis. I want this service, I want a new service. And we have 12, 13, 14 services constantly improving on a monthly basis. And we are like a little poor Newtons sitting in the tree, and we get all these apples, and we have to implement in one system. And I feel very sympathetic when we had discussions with Lockheed and with US colleagues on the NDS, GPS, how it constrains the engineering. For us, it's the same, but at service level. We are getting golden apple after golden apple, and we have to develop one system to cover it. And how we do that? We have two streams. We have a current system in operations developed in the last 20 years, where we are squeezing to the limit at engineering level. And you will see, for me, this is the best year in Galileo. We have not launched, yes. But we have improved 200 to 300% critical PNT parameters. Positioning, time to acquisition, time to first fix. 200 to 300%, each of them, only in the last 12 months. This is a remarkable achievement done on a system that was fit for purpose, 750 kilo satellites. And we do it by some engineering minds on our teams that squeeze this small flexibility. And on parallel, we have a parallel track, which is a full flexible system for the future, so that we can easily catch these golden apples and implement them in a 12 to 18 months time frame. So how we do this? This is our roadmap. You have seen it. We have it regularly. It's basically incremental roadmap. We are taking the lessons learned from other GNSS systems, which we appreciate, and we do incremental deployment of infrastructure, both in ground and space. We are now, as you will see, on our 5th and 6th satellite family, if we can the experimental ones, which we always do. Achievements of this year, and as I said, we are extremely proud. We have achieved basically an incredible level of positioning, not only at signal satellite level, which I was explaining Eric before, but on the high accuracy, down to 20 centimeters global positioning in typical days, because it's initial service, but we will go to phase 2, go to real committed global positioning. We have a quasi-pilot signal that has improved the time to acquisition times 2, times 3, so 200 to 300% compared to the current system. It's still, of course, in test, as Eric was saying, but we plan to implement it not only in the first generation, but even more advanced version in the second generation. We have a 9F message, and I see Stefan here and Juan Pablo. We have a 9F message that allow us to improve the time to first fix, times 2 also. And you will see some slides later. And all this is in a system that is fixed, that has a grade of variability, of flexibility less than 3%, 2% of the specifications. Imagine when we deploy a system that is fully flexible for the future. And on the second generation side, as you will see in the next slides, and as you are already looking at the satellite, yes, we have a satellite. We have finished the system PDR. It was completed. So we have baseline all the activities for the node validation and for the future. We have signed a major set of contracts, as you will see later. And we are very proud to be testing today, as we speak, both the structural models of the first 2 satellites and the EM payload with all the new signal capabilities in STEC. But let's go to the current system. The current system is showing a remarkable resilience. I still remember, I don't know if it was 6 years, 7 years ago, there was all these stories on the clocks and so on. In reality, this Ion is the first Ion where we are crossing the half of expected life barrier. So the average value of our satellites is 7 years, as you see later. Our satellites are basically already past 50% of their lifetime. And we only had 2 satellites out of 28 where we had issues at clock level, 204 to 10. So if we make some quick math, this is like 7%. So only 7% of the satellites of the 28, after half of their lifetime, have had issues. The rest of the constellation is behaving extremely well, and we are proud. And on top of that, we have 10 satellites, as you will see later, ready to be launched. The single performance at satellite level was already presented by Eric, but you can see the CCRMS accuracy, which is fantastic. We have the best satellite at best day with an accuracy of 3.7 centimeters, as you can see there. And you have the monthly 95% and the constellation one on values that are also remarkable. This is achieved through our 3 main key design features, of course the clocks, but also the global network of stations, including new stations in the Pacific, and the uplink rate, of course. We uplink corrections every 100 minutes, worst case. And in the future, with the intersatellite links, we will be able to do this in near real-time basis. So we have targets of improvement of performance from this data times 4, times 8, thanks to these characteristics. On the side of the safety of life, as you know very well, a long time ago, we discovered the safety of life service per se, but it has been an incredible amount of work. I don't know how many millions of working group C meetings and other kind of meetings in other areas have been done in order to achieve the Galileo support safety of life. So this culminated, I see Juan Pablo and Stefan, culminated in May this year, where we published the PSAT PCONST. Still conservative, we are nominally much better than the values published, but we want to monitor the constellation and evolve these commitments over time. I think today we are in 3 to 10 minus 5 PSAT and 2 10 minus 4 PCONST, but the system is behaving extremely well, and we are continuing to provide this commitment. On top of that, we implemented, and this I'm really ready to confess it was inspired by GPS, we implemented what we call extended operations mode. So the capability of the constellation to provide services without any ground contact for a period of time. We are today deploying operation already for a certain time frame, 7 days, but we're going to expand it in the future. So our robustness and resilience at constellation level has also significantly improved only on this year. On the side of the INAV, this is one of my favorite diagrams of the presentation. By doing basically a small upgrade on the software of every satellite, which we have done for all satellites, and implementing the red Solomon set and the red set data sets, we have improved, as you have seen there, you see on the right, the legacy system, and the time to first fix that you have with two solutions. One solution, which is a normal read Solomon, 460 bits, I think it is, when you get the full accuracy, and another solution which is the red set, which is 122 bits. Now, with this, you achieve a 2 times faster time to first fix accuracy. The deployment is now complete, and we are just now working with the manufacturers so they implement this capability. But as we said, we are extremely proud that this key feature for us is now improved, and all the receiver manufacturers, especially the ones needing a faster data modulation, are able to enjoy it and take credit of it. On the satellite situation, as explained Eric, of course, we didn't do the launch. We are planning to do it next year. We have 10 satellites ready. It's a similar situation that you have with your SB7, 8, 9 in GPS. But we like it bigger in Europe, so we do 10. We have 10 in storage. We like to have them there. Now, we plan to launch them as soon as possible. Our constellation has no issues on performance, but we know it's better to be safe than sorry. So we plan to launch them as soon as possible. All have been qualified. It has to be said that the OHB production and quality on the qualification process has been excellent in the last years. And thanks to these efforts, as you see there, we did the last qualification, which is down in the bottom left picture. On the ground segment side, also we try to learn as much as possible. We open our ears and we learn. Instead of going for big developments on ground segment, we do for continuous releases. We have been implemented on the first generation first to a limited extent, but in the second generation even more, a continuous rollover every 12 to 18 months of a new ground segment release. The latest one that we are deploying, as in the slides, we are deploying the open service FOC infrastructure with all these extended operations for the open service and the autonomy of the satellites. We have a global network of cybersecurity monitoring in all our ground segment, covering every single Galileo asset worldwide. And we are finishing the deployment of a critical, because we are also going for the non-civil part, of course, the deployment of the critical PRS infrastructure, so our capability can be declared initially operational. On the side of the control part, we have done a new TTC station. At the beginning, Galileo, if you remember our presentations 2002 and 3, we were targeting 4 to 5 TTCs. We already have 8 and growing. Why? Because the needs for managing the constellation are growing. And also in second generation, these TTC stations will feed all our ISL network. So we are even upgrading them even more in the years to come. We have a ground control segment fully virtualized now with the state-of-the-art software technology and a new museum facility for monitoring of services. And this is only the system in operations. As I say, we are squeezing the margins, and even by squeezing the margins, you get these major leaps on performance. And as you remember, we did a presentation in 16 that was basically 3 slides with some visions, like Dr. Parkinson was explaining yesterday on the visions of GPS. On our side, the vision was to be able to accommodate all global GNSS community commission use per request as much as possible. So we build a constellation of procurements. We have 30 procurements, nearly a satellite constellation, but this is a procurement constellation. And these constellations allows us to segregate and to implement as fast as possible all the new technologies. On satellite side, we had 2 debates. do small increments and therefore go one by one on the batches, or be brave. So we were brave. And I hope that in 2-3 years from now, our braveness pays out with excellence. But we are still testing the EM payload. And we went dual source because of this, because we were pushing so much the state-of-the-art of European technology, of course, the technology available in Europe, that we wanted to mitigate the risk as much as possible. We have a contract with ADS Germany, I see Diana there, which is working on the payload, and then we have a contract with Thales Italy. And these satellites, since the last ION, they have passed the preliminary design review successfully. They have passed already the EM testing at payload level, antenna level, and we are about to start the critical design review this around October, November for the first one, and next year. Our target today, and I say today, because we all know this business, how it is, if there is not a single anomaly during the testing in the next 3 years, we will launch December 25. And of course, if there is all the launcher capacity. But for us, it's very critical that this first, the PFM satellites of these two families are perfect, as per the level of specifications on flexibility and performance. So we are doing a very intensive test campaign, starting already in July, that will span for the next 2 years and a half, in order to verify that all the new capabilities and flexibility that we are putting in place are achieved. On the other side, we are exploding the clock environment in Europe. We have two operational clocks that you know very well, PHM and the RAFs. We are now evolving these clocks to a new versions of the PHM RAFs, but in parallel, we are doing experimental. Our G2 satellites, each of them has a hosted payload clock slot. So we can experiment one type of clock every satellite we launch. Very similar to the 3F expansion capabilities that were mentioned yesterday, this morning, sorry. And on the ground, we have a diversification of ground segment and test beds. We're going to face a major challenge when we launch G2, which I'm sure you are aware of it because of the O6 situation, is we're going to have a legacy set of services operating in continuous, and in parallel, we are going to have this. So the ground segment allow us to contribute to these activities. And this is basically the slide of our 5th and 6th family of satellites. You can see on the top left, the arrival of the first structural model, our clock farm, where we have all our clock babies. We have there the acoustic testing, the EM testing of the antenna on the center bottom, and then we have on the bottom left the test of the antenna. So it is now a reality. These satellites are now being tested at vibration level in a stack, even in a stack configuration. On the ground and system, there has been an acquisition, incredible performance from the procurement and acquisition. We have basically placed around 1 billion euro contracts with most of the key companies in Europe. We have more than 30 contracts with 300 subcontractors, and all these activities will lead to a set of capabilities that are described in this slide. We have 4 main challenges. Number 1, to adapt the ground segment to manage 2 satellite platforms within the satellite links. And I tell you, there is no a better or a more fascinating engineering challenge than doing an intersatellite link at the same pace in parallel with 2 different providers, all going through the same design cycles and with a volatile or non-stabilized ICD. And this is a big challenge, but for us, it will improve our performance ×4 on position accuracy, and it will improve our capacity to adapt to all the golden apples in a much faster time frame, because we will be able to use all this data through the constellation. We have, of course, orbit racing, which is mostly an issue related to the flexibility to launch on the launch vehicles, of course, with the constraints of Europe. One key issue that is always disregarded is the system integration. We are going for releases on a yearly basis. Our ground segment doesn't have big bangs. We are planning, for example, the contract we signed in the previous pictures, we signed in July, has the first release capable to manage the satellites in 2 years from now. And this is a continuous improvement process. And of course, we go for higher speed S1 in order to accommodate all the ASL data flows. On the service side, and I think it's the last 2 slides, we presented in detail last year. I will not go again in detail. The work is going extremely well. Commission, JUSP, and ESA have a fantastic coordination. We have a full plan of what we call our service ramp-ups, literally going up and down, mostly when the new satellites of G2 are arriving. We have key services that you have not heard in the Golden Apples presentation of Eric, because they are not there yet, but they are coming. Time services is coming. Signal ranging authentication, not message, is coming. And all this is coming in the next 2 years with the new G2 architecture. And for the final operational capability, we have basically, as I said, we are preparing the second batch Yesterday, I think there was a question, we got a question of how many batches. We are preparing the second batch. We did a dual source on the first one, on the second batch we will see. And we have the final operational capability. In parallel, especially because of the lead and the insistence of our director, Javier Benedicto, which is there, we are changing our mindset. We are starting to think Galileo into a multi-layer synergies type of environment. We are starting to give requirements to LEO PNT, so they have GNSS sensors on board, and we get these observables and improve our performance ×2 on the Galileo system. And many other engineering challenges where we start mixing up regional, global, LEO, MEO, and other orbits type of activities in order to give you the best performance possible. And to finalize, I was very touched. I found your presentation, Dr. Parkinson, excellent yesterday. And I like, in particular, the vision, how a single vision can lead or can bring teams together. We presented this vision in 2016, but I would like to recall it today. We have been working 6 years with this vision, and we will continue to that. And it's very simple. It's a question to you. Can you imagine any new capability and service? Our vision, our teams work to develop and deploy it in 12 to 18 months. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Miguel. Thanks, Eric. We don't have time for questions, but warm up and keep them for after the break at the end, where we will be calling everyone on stage. So we move forward with the QZSS presentation, which will be given by Mr. Kishimoto. Mr. Kishimoto entered the Japan Aerospace Exploitation Agency, JAXA, in 2003. And from then, since then, he's been in charge of the development of the QZSS system. He moved then later to the Cabinet Office, on QZSS Strategy Office, and he's basically responsible for the whole development of QZSS. He was in charge of the development for QZSS 1, then 2 to 4, and now recently also for QZSS 5. We are looking forward to your presentation.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and I am Motohisa Kishimoto from Cabinet Office. And today it is a great honor to give a presentation at this Ion GNSS. I'll give you an outline of my presentation. First, I'll talk about the space policy of space policy and plan. And then, second, system and services of QZSS will be presented. And third one, I'll show the QZSS satellite constellation. First, I talk about the space policy and QZSS plan. Currently, Cabinet Office has been developing the 7th satellite constellation. The Cabinet revised our new basic plan of space policy on June 30th to this year, just before. And it defines that the number of satellites for the QZSS should be increased from 7 to 11 to achieve that improving stability and reliability as one of the social infrastructures by securing backup function for coming full-scale use. Improving the convenience of high precision positioning services, and expanding usable area. This slide shows a brief history of QZSS. In September 2010, the first QZSS Michibiki was launched. And in 2017, QZSS 2, 3, 4 was successfully launched, and 4 satellite constellation was established. And on November 1st, 2018, QZSS officially began operational services. And 2 years ago, 2021, the successor to the first Michibiki was launched. And last year, that QZSS 1R was serviced in. This slide also shows the system expansion of QZSS. Since 2018, the 4 satellite vehicle constellation, that is at least one satellite always present over Japan, has been used together with GPS, GIP's complementary service. And in addition, GNSS augmentation signal is generated to achieve highly accurate satellite positioning with centimeters level. To establish 7 satellite constellations capable of positioning using only QZSS satellites, additional 3 satellites will be launched sequentially from Japanese fiscal year 2023 to 24, based on the development status of the H3 launch vehicle. Japanese fiscal year begins in April. To improve resilience for more stable positioning and to expand the usable area, Cabinet Office has started study and development of 11 satellite constellation from 7 satellite constellation. This is a 4 satellite constellation, 7 and 11. This slide also shows QZSS constellation expansion plan. 4 satellite constellation consists of 4 orbital planes. 1 satellite is on each plane, and this 7 satellite constellation consists of 5 orbital planes. So 1 satellite is on each QZSS orbit plane, and 3 satellites is on each geoplane. And 11 satellite constellation also orbital plane is 5, and 2 satellites is on each QGeo plane, and 3 satellites is on geoplane. Well, excuse me. And wait a minute. And this okay. Additional 2 QGO ground track will be emerged around this west and east areas. And next, I'll talk about the system and service of QZSS. The satellite constellation 4 satellite is under operation to provide foreign services. GBS complementary service that improve positioning accuracy by increasing the number of visible satellites. And the second one is GNSS augmentation service, like submeter level augmentation service and centimeter level augmentation service, and Madoka PPP and SBUS that improves positioning accuracy by error correction information. Okay. And third one is messaging service. We call satellite. We call DC report, the satellite report for disaster and crisis management, and it consists of also we call QMP. This one is a QZ safety confirmation service. And as a system overview, the constellation consists of 1 GEO satellite, QZ3, and 3 QGO satellites. 3 satellites is IGSO, inclined geostationary orbit, and GEO satellites. And the coverage area is Asia and Pacific region, but some services are domestic. For example, SRAS and CRAS and messaging service are domestic service. Okay, this slide shows the satellite progress status. QZSS 5 to 7 development is now ongoing. System level testing such as vibration test and so on is in progress. And the QZS1R was successfully launched 2 years ago and started service in last year. That QZS1R replaced the first Michibiki satellite QZS1, and the hottest news is that QZS1 was retired and reorbited. And QZS antenna pattern for SSV space service volume users have been published since last month. And QZS satellite information for precise object determination users was also updated in the following slide. This graph is QZS1R. This slide also shows the ground system progress status. QZS ground systems that could operate 7 satellites have just completed by the end of August this year. QZS has a foreign ground system, 2 master control stations located in Hitachi-Ota here and Kobe here, and 10 satellite tracking and control stations, mainly located in southwestern islands, because the QZS ground track is here, so to track around such areas, and over 30 monitoring stations around the world. The development of 3 additional satellites is ongoing. The QZS will start 7 satellite service around 2024, but it depends on the launch timing on the H3 launch vehicle schedule. This slide also shows the performance of PNT service in a year. Specification is less than 2.6 meters, 95%, and all satellites of signal space user range error is about 0.7 or 8 meters, and that is much better than the specification. And improvement of the signal space range error of QZS1R to 4 is now ongoing. Okay, and next I talk about the 7 satellite constellation. The 3 additional satellites will be placed on IGSO QZS5 and 0 on 90.5 east longitude QZS6, and the close geostationary orbit on 175 west longitude as QZS7. This constellation aims to be visible more than 1 satellite at high elevation angle, to be visible more than 4 satellites for a long time, and to get more better duration of precision. Okay. This chart shows the positioning signals of QZSS. QZS 5 to 7, all these 3 satellites transmit L1CB signal and L1C signal and L5 signal and L6 signal. And QZS 6 and 7 satellite transmits L1S3 S-bus signal and also transmits L5S for D7C S-bus signal. Okay. So additional services start around 2024. The PNT service users obtain PVT solution with using ranging signals provided by 7 satellite constellations. And NMA will be added to LNAV, CNAV, and CNAV2 message. And the Madoka PPP service covers a major part of Eastern Hemisphere and provides PPP correction on L6 signal. And the trial service of this Madoka PPP service has begun since September last year, and operational service will start from next 2024. And the expand DC report EWSS is in addition to current DC report service that is generated by Japan Meteorological Agency. The other disaster-related information called L alert and J alert, such as an evacuation order, will be delivered for only domestic after Japanese fiscal year 2024. And similar information for Asia, Oceania region, may be broadcasted after also Japanese fiscal year 2024 as early warning satellite service as demonstration in cooperation with partners in the region. And the common EWSS message has been agreed with EC. And from this slide are our Madoka PPP services. Madoka PPP is called the Multi-GNSS Advanced Orbit and Clock Augmentation Precise Point Positioning. This trial service has begun from last year for Asia Pacific region as a trial service. The operational service will start no later than Japanese fiscal year 2024. And Mirai GNSS monitoring station network has been released since April last year. And also to reduce initial convergence time, the ionospheric correction data will be broadcasted from Japanese fiscal year 2024 as an experiment. And the Madoka Lib, which is a software test library of Madoka PPP, has been released in June this year. Please see the above slide. Okay. The Madoka PPP enables high precision, precise positioning by augmenting some of GNSS errors, such errors. Madoka PPP provides two levels of service. One is global PPP and second one is fast PPP with ionospheric correction. As a global PPP, highly precise positioning anywhere signals can be received. And global PPP provides satellite-dependent error corrections. It means orbit, clock, code phase bias errors by using QZSS6E signals. And this fast PPP is a faster PPP with using regional or nationwide course observation data. And in addition to global PPP, regional error corrections, ionospheric correction will be provided by using QZSS D signal and especially in QZSS6 and 7. And the Madoka PPP specification is here. And this Madoka PPP service defined and described on PS QZSS 3 published last year. And this performance standard defines augmentation constellations, QZSS, GPS, Galileo, and GLONASS, and also defines service areas like this, and minimum performance level. The positioning accuracy is less than horizontal 30 centimeters and vertical 50 centimeters. And the convergence time is less than 1,800 seconds. The first PPP, Madoka PPP specification is here. The Madoka ionospheric correction function defines its type specification as below. And the surface area where course data available or ionospheric correction products are available area within around 100 kilometers. That is to be confirmed by demonstration from course. The minimum performance level is here. The positioning accuracy is same of the previous slide, but the convergence time is 100 seconds as the target. And this slide shows the Madoka PPP performance result. Here is one of the PPP results based on data from IS monitoring station in Malaysia. Using the evaluation period is December last year. The initial convergence time to reach specification is about 780 seconds. And horizontal accuracy after such a convergence is 5.64 centimeters. The vertical accuracy after convergence is 9.46 centimeters. Okay. This slide also shows other IS monitoring station. This one. From these figures, better initial convergence time than the defined specification could be here, less than 1,800 seconds. And accuracy after the convergence, about 10 centimeters of accuracy confirmed like this. Okay. So this slide shows QGNMA, QZSS navigation message authentication service QGNMA will launch in Japanese fiscal year 2024 to enhance the resilience against spoofing attacks. Navigation message in the foreign signals are authenticated with using elliptic curve digital signature algorithm. QZ signals L1CA or CB, L1C, L5 are directly protected by self-authentication. And GNSS signals GPS L1CA, L1C, L5, and Galileo L1B, L5A are protected by cross-authentication using this L6E signal. The interface specification of this QGNMA is now available on this our website. And the test transmission of QGNMA started from the end of July this year. This is a brief block chart. And this shows QGIS application. As of April 2023, approximately 415 products are compatible with QGIS, and a lot of applications such as autonomous driving, buoy for real-time ocean tide monitoring, wearable terminals, and drones emerging. Okay, I'll conclude my presentation as a summary. QZSS is a Japanese regional navigation satellite system to improve not only GNSS availability, but also accuracy and reliability. Now our constellation is 4 satellites, 3 IGSOM and 1 GEO satellites. The replacement of QGIS-1, we call QGIS-1R, was successfully launched 2 years ago and started service from last year. And just QGIS-1 was returned and reorbited to the orbit that will not re-enter the protected region within the next 100 years, corresponding to the ISO. And the next one is future expansion to 7 satellite constellation. 3 additional satellites will be launched around 2023 and 2024. QS will provide independent PNT capability for more reliable applications. And ISO QZS5, GEO QZS6, and QGEO QZS7 will be added to the existing constellation. And QGNMM will provide message authentication capability to users. And the Madoka PPP will become operational service no later than 2024, and also EWSS. These services will be available in Asia, Pacific region, and Mirai, this observation data collection and sharing system was established from April last year, and trial service of Madoka PPP started in September last year with good performance. So I'm imagining new applications such as autonomous driving, drone operation, with some commercial devices using QZSS. Okay, thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kishimoto, and thank you to all of our speakers this morning. We did not have time for any questions, but after the break, we'll have updates from the Korea positioning system and from NavIC, and we'll have ample time with all of the speakers after that for all of the questions. So please write down all the questions you may have had on these earlier ones. At this point, we'll take a break. There are refreshments right now in the exhibit hall. This session will resume promptly, though, at 10:35, so we hope to see you back there then. Thank you. Strategy team within the Ministry of Science and ICT within the Republic of the Korean government. He's been the head since January of 2022. Prior to that, in 2019 to 2021, Mr. Kim served as Senior Deputy Director in the Space and Big Science Policy Division. His responsibilities were space policy planning, international cooperation for space development, and KPS program planning. Earlier still, he was the Deputy Director in the Ministry of Science and ICT from 2015 to 2018, and also within the Korean Intellectual Property Office from 2010 to 2014. He's a graduate of the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, and his background in education anyways was in aerospace. So welcome, Mr. Kim.
Thank you, Dr. Haggerty and Dr. Rodriguez. Good morning, everyone. I'm Tae-gyu Kim, head of Satellite Navigation Development Strategy Team at the Ministry of Science and ICT of the Republic of Korea government. I'm glad to meet you everyone again in Denver. And thank you for the opportunity to introduce our KPS and CAS status at the ION GNSS Plus 2023. First of all, I introduce our basic plan of Korean positioning system. The main reasons why we are developing KPS is to provide high precision PNT information for emerging technologies such as self-driving car, urban area mobility, or many smart systems, which are representatives for the fourth industrial revolution. In addition, we needed a plan to provide PNT services to meet various satellite navigation needs, such as SPAS, search and rescue service, or centimeter level service. So, developing a regional navigation satellite system is the most effective solution for these demands. The KPS program was started from last year, 2022, and system development is expected to be completed by 2035. The KPS program is being governed by the Ministry of Science and ICT, and many research institutes, including Korea Aerospace Research Institute, have participated in KPS research and development. Like other GNSS, the KPS is also composed of three segments, which are space, ground, and user segments. The space segment consists of 8 satellites, and the ground segment consists of operation center, satellite control center, antenna station, monitoring station, and mission control stations that generate correction information for more accuracy navigation services. We will also develop various receivers for each purpose, such as development receiver, reference station receiver, or user receiver. On the left side, you can see the ground track of the satellites, and on the right side, their movements on the orbit. The space segments consist of 3 geostationary satellites and 5 inclined geosynchronous orbit satellites. 2 geosatellites have S-bus payload, and 1 geosatellite has search and rescue payload. In this slide, I will explain KPS development time schedule. As I mentioned, the KPS program and research and development was started from last year, 2022. We also submitted the application for international satellite network to the ITU in 2022. And started coordinating satellite network with other countries from this year. We've finished the KPS system design review, SDR, on June this year. PDR and CDR and international cooperation will be progressed, and signal and constellation design are also ongoing. After that, in the system development period, satellite and ground subsystem development will begin, and the first IGSO satellite will be launched in 2027. Finally, in the deployment and validation period, the IOC of the system are scheduled to proceed within the launch of the remaining 7 satellites and completion of the ground system. In addition, I would like to brief the status of CAS project. As you may know, the CAS is the Korean Satellite-Based Augmentation System. The main goal of CAS is to provide APV1 service to the air navigation user on the Incheon FIR area in South Korea. So the target accuracies are 16 meters of horizontal and 20 meters of vertical. We expect to start APV1 SOL service from the end of this year, 2023. You can see the CAS system deployment. The CAS ground system consists of 7 reference stations, 2 uplink stations, 2 processing stations, and 2 control stations. In addition, 2 GEO satellites will be deployed. CAS first geostationary satellite was Malaysian BDS 3D satellite, which contained CAS payloads, was successfully launched to the geostationary orbit in 2022. After launch of the CAS first GEO satellite, the in-orbit test of the CAS navigation payload and CAS factory acceptance test was completed successfully on July in 2022, respectively. The CAS Omnic station and the first GEO satellite integration test was also finished on November in 2022. Currently, CAS MT0 and 1 message is being broadcast. As a future plan, the system qualification review is scheduled on November of 2023. Korea has been conducting a number of research to increase accuracy and integrity of GNSS-based PNT information. So, in Korea, there is the IPNT, Institute of Positioning, Navigation, and Timing in Korea. The IPNT is the main academic society in South Korea related to PNT technologies. It was established in 1994, and main objective is to exchange academic information and promote research and development activities related to GNSS among industry, university, research institute, and government side. The IPNT has held a conference and workshop from 1994 to present. Next IPNT annual conference will be held on November in Jeju Island, which is well known as a warm and beautiful place in Korea. The IPNT has pressed the Journal of Positioning, Navigation, and Timing from 2012. Overall, its role in Korea is similar to ION's that in the US. Today, I introduce the KPS and CAS status update, which are systems for providing high precise PNT information on the Korean Peninsula area. These are able to increase usefulness of civil GNSS users who are located in East Asia. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention. 고맙습니다.
Thank you very much. We're good with the schedule, but still we move forward, and then we'll come with all the questions at the very end. So the next presentation is going to be given by Dr. Sura, and it's going to be on a system that, as far as I remember, for nearly 20 years we've been trying to get here on stage. It was in the mouth of everyone, the Indian navigation system, and finally today we got him here. So no pressure, Dr. Sura, but we've been looking forward to this moment for a long time. And let me introduce to Dr. Sura. He's a postgraduate in electronics engineering. He joined the ISRO in 1997. ISRO is the Indian Space Research Organization. He's been working on baseband data handling systems and ISRO remote sensing satellites. And currently, he is the program director of all navigation satellite system program, basically IRNSS and GAGAN. I learned today the difference between IRNSS and NavIC. In my old days, for me, IRNSS was the navigation system. I learned it from Dr. Sura today. It was referring only to the spacecraft, and NavIC is for the full constellation. And yeah, I guess just like me, everyone is looking forward to your presentation. Welcome. think that much that we don't even find presentation.
So good morning all of you. I do not want to waste that time. So whatever be there in the presentation, I will be explaining to you also. By the time presentation comes, most of the matter would have been covered. So as he was telling, we have got the NavIC, that is navigation with the Indian constellation, and other part of the program is the GAGEN, the GPS-aided geo-augmented system. So this GAGEN point of, NavIC point of view, this is a basic constellation with 7 spacecrafts. So before coming to that, let me thank ION for giving me an opportunity for coming here and presenting this. And what I understand is this is the first time from NavIC community somebody is addressing to the ION conference. So one of the basic reasons is we have to travel from India to here. Probably it is around 13 to 14 hours of time lag. So even now also I'm not sure whether I'm in the daytime or in the night time. So kindly excuse me for the lag in my talk also. Yeah, thank you. Please.
Good. I have a future if I'm fired.
So thank you, sir, for this presentation material, because I had sent, I had not uploaded into the website actually. So if I have been speaking about the NavIC constellation, it has got 7 satellites basically as per the configuration, and it is supposed to serve the Indian regional area. This is nothing but around 1,500 kilometers insulated area from the Indian geopolitical boundary. And we had our systems established some time back, but because of some failures in the atomic clocks what is seen in the system, it was an unexpected thing, and now we are replenishing our systems with a new series of satellites. So basically the NavIC system provides SPS services in L1, L5 and S-band. L1 is the most recent addition into this family. It also provides RF services in the L5 and S-band. L5 and S-band, it is already in use, but as I said, only 4 satellites are being operational right now in this configuration. And the new one what is launched is in the L1, that is the NVS-01 spacecraft. So that is having L1 also in addition, as an additional signal. And as I said again, it's a GPS-aided geo-augmented navigation. It provides the air navigation service FTF-5 over Indian Flight Information Region FIR, and it is already certified RMP-01 and APV-10. So this is the architecture. We have got a ground segment, and the space segment is nothing but 7 satellites with 3 GSO and 4 IGSO. Ground segment we have got navigation centers, uplink centers 2 numbers, and one-way ranging stations 17 numbers. Two-way ranging stations, IR-CDR stations, there are 5 numbers. One more is coming up in Trivandrum actually, and we have network timing center, spacecraft control center at the MCF and Bhopal in India, and frequency band I already explained, and services are SPS and RS. And its current status is the depleting satellites constellation we are replenishing with the new series of spacecraft, that is NVS-01. And the first among the second generation satellites launched in May 2023. The initial operations and in-orbit testing has been completed successfully, and the satellite is made operational, removing the alert flag. And let me say this new signal is in L1. It's an interoperable signal with SBOC modulation and IC4 PRN codes. It is compatible with our GNSS signals in L1 band. And I'm happy to say that the final ICD also released last month to the public for usage. And NavIC is adopted for assisted GNSS by global standards, as well as it is incorporated into AIS 140 standards of India. NavIC has been incorporated in the NEMEA 183 standard also, and RTCM's 10403 standard. NavIC has been accepted as a component of worldwide radio navigation system for operation in the Indian Ocean region by IMO. So it's also offering short servicing messages for users in Indian region through INS 1A and 1E satellite. These 2 satellites are not being used for navigation purpose. It has been used for messaging services. It is using presently used by the inquiries for broadcasting potential fishing zones, cyclone, high wave alerts, etc. The fishermen across the country. It is NavIC now. We are planning to have an advisory portal. Once the satellite is nearly configuration is getting completed, and the advisory will give all information regarding the health and any planned maneuvers, everything for this through this portal. And indigenous timescale system, this is being deployed already in our ground stations, and major smartphone chip manufacturers, including Qualcomm, MediaTek, they have included NavIC in their SoC. And the next one, what we are planning is the NavIC message authentication, as the previous speakers also talked about. This also is planned, and the system level testing is under progress for the NavIC system. And these are the few industry partners with NavIC. And talking about the GNSS system is a joint development by ISRO and the Airports Authority of India, and this is to deploy and certify an operational bus for India. And as I said, RMP01 and APV01 services are already in place. Gagan final operational phase certifiable S-Bus built over the TDS elements with additional ground stations and space segment already completed. And this is what the graph it is showing is the FAR region. And it has been again already certified by the DGCA, and it is fully operational from the month of May 2015. And we have got the 3 satellites in this configuration: GSAT 8 at 55-degree inclination, GSAT 10 at 83-degree, GSAT 15 at 93-degree. All 3 satellites are in full health and providing the satellite, S-Bus services. And this is the basic architecture. We have got 3 inlet stations, and there are 2 master control centers, and there is a master data communication network connected to this control centers. And at present, the Airport Authority of India has developed 65 localized performance with vertical guidance procedures, and DGCA has laid out the Gagan-based LPU approach procedures for operational by commercial aircraft and at the selected airports. Already testing is done at few of the aircraft in few airports in Kerala in India, and also it has been used in UAVs for self-autonomous operation. So this also has successfully demonstrated, and we are now waiting for a complete operational usage of Gagan system in the basically in the aviation community. So this is all about the 2 systems what I have, IRNSS or what we call NavIC and the Gagan system. And the future plans what we have got is in the NVS series we have got another 4 more satellites to be launched. So that will make the NVS family as the 5 satellites will give L1 services, but L1 services still it will be available. It has to be made available with additional 2 more satellites. So that is planned in the next phase. So this current phase will be completed by 2025. And now it will be declared fully operational with all the advanced products like NMAs or PPV services, and all performance standard also is planned to be rolled out. That is the plans for us. Thank you very much for your patient listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Schur. I'd ask at this point if all the panel members would please come up, and we'll have you take a seat. And we'll welcome questions from the audience. While they're gathering up here, anyone have a question you'd like to ask? And the panelists may also ask questions to each other, if you like. Yeah, please. Mr. Niles, please, go ahead.
I was wondering, the Indian system...
You want to bring the mic up?
Hey, the Gagan presented that you had 65 approaches. With regard to that, you specifically mentioned domestic aircraft. Will foreign aircraft also be allowed to use those?
Right now, these procedures have been tested in the domestic aircrafts. I'm audible?
You're not on.
Hello. Yeah, it is tested in the domestic aircrafts. Still not audible, I think, right?
light is on.
I think you want. Yeah. So it is tested in domestic aircrafts, but I am not very sure about the procedure is without any modification applicable for international aircrafts, because it is designed. I mean, it is for the Indian FIR region. It is basically it is meant for. So the other part, I have to really look at that now. Thank you for the question.
Okay, and then a follow-up for the CAS. When do you expect to have procedures developed for CAS?
It's for CAS.
Well, yes. As I mentioned, we expect to broadcast CAS open service at the end of this year, and actually. It is in charge of Ministry of Land Infrastructure and Transportation. So they are ongoing to prepare service. Yes.
Okay, another question, please.
Yeah, okay, my question goes to Mr. Kim. So maybe I missed that in the beginning, but about KPS, when is the ICD available? Signal and data specification?
Well, we are just on the beginning stages. So I cannot speak exactly schedule of ICD, but our target is to finish the all system deployment will be in 2035.
Hi, my question's for Mr. Mantiga and the Galileo team. In your presentation, you had talked a little bit about some of your clocks for G2G, and that you're having 2 operational clocks, 2 clock evolutions, and one kind of new clock that you're one experimental clock. I was wondering if you could expand a little bit more about those clock evolutions and experimental clock.
Okay, so the evolutions is very simple. We have a PHM and RAFs. I think you know them because we have been talking about them for 2 decades. We are evolving these clocks to a next level of performance, a bit better performance, but mostly on resilience, to make sure we have a resilience. We have realized, and we were talking with De La Pena before, clocks is the most difficult business on satellite navigation. In terms of manufacturing, you have the same clock, but we have even seen that by the change of very low level N-7 manufacturing soldering processes, you get a completely different clock. So you think you have a PHM, but one and the other have nothing to do. So we are now basically in the next generation, in this evolution of the clocks, we are optimizing all these areas that allow us to provide further robustness. We are implementing a novel approach that, again, like all other characteristics of G2, will give us a lot of performance, which is the virtual clock, the paper clock ensemble on board. We don't depend on a single clock. We will have a mixture of all the clock solutions to get the best results short-term, mid-term, and long-term on the clock precision. On the experimental, we cannot comment exactly which one it is yet because it's under procurement or acquisition, as you call it in US. But we have selected one, we are going to sign soon, that will fly in our first satellites. But we have an open call for potential new technologies. We decided from the beginning to keep one slot free, so we will have 24, 30 slots. Most of the times it will be one of these 5, but we could basically move around with different technologies. And our plan is to continue to deploy these capabilities and to experiment. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, Greg? I'm going to keep picking ones on the opposite side of the room because Jose needs some exercise.
I have a question for Del. We're all really super excited to see OCX come online after quite some time. And I was really happy to hear you speak really confidently about the schedule. And I'm just curious what it is that's made you feel so confident that this is the schedule that we're gonna hit, so we can all see the benefits of GPS 3.
That's great. Great question. I get that question every time I talk about this program. To include being in the Pentagon, briefing the DoD Enterprise Management Board for PNT just last week. So that program has been rebaselined several times. Since I've been the PO, we've been monitoring a set of metrics at this stage of the program, which I find to be very, very indicative of how that schedule is going to close. Many of you in this room have developed very complex systems. And before you start FQT, which is the formal qualification testing, run for record, it's got to go, no workarounds. We dry run all the procedures. We collect data on the procedures. We dry run all of the tests. We collect data on what's going to pass, what's not going to pass. So just at a top level, I've got like 5 metrics that I look at with my counterpart at Raytheon every 2 weeks. My next review with him is next Tuesday, which they're going to go over the entrance criteria for test readiness review for FQT according to MIL Standard 21B, for those of you who work the DoD programs. MIL Standard 21B has 19 entrance criteria to start FQT and TRR. They're green on most of them. There's a couple that they got to work off, but the key metric that I'm watching right now is the number of what I consider to be like Cat 1, Cat 2 deficiencies. These are things that have to be done to operate the system. Once we get that number acceptable, on programs of this complexity, it is rare that you enter an FQT program and you are 100% clean. I challenge anybody in this room who's ever built anything with high level complexity that you ever entered formal qualification testing and 100% clean, because if you did, you probably spent years trying to get there. It's like that asymptotic model, right? But so quality is something that I'm after, and if they convince Raytheon convinces the government with the data on these metrics that I'm watching, that they're going to achieve the type of operational quality that we're going to demand when we go to the site, that's when we'll know. And I'm tracking that, and that all looks like it's going to converge over the next couple of weeks.
Any other questions? I'll take advantage of asking one. You mentioned, I can't remember if it was Eric or Miguel, about some barriers you have to prevent errors from propagating through the constellation, which would be important for safety of life services like ARAIM, for instance. Can you describe a little more what those barriers are, and also about what's being done to keep those barriers effective when you move to crosslinks and other things that could otherwise allow such errors to propagate faster through the constellation?
Yes, so we implemented a new set of barriers. You know, we have our orbital processing facility where you have all the algorithms. And when we removed the safety of life service, most of these safety of life type of barriers had to be removed. There was an independent even rack for the barriers. So through the work of Commission, JUSPA, and ESA, we started little by little in collaboration with the international community to implement some of these barriers to ensure that you have basically all the parameters of a RAIN. And now they are being deployed. And that's why we were able to declare in ICAO in May the PSAT, the PCONST, and we are, of course, still monitoring and converting. These have been implemented. On second generation, the situation is still under development. We just passed the PDR at system level for the final performance in 35. And it's true that FDIR complexity multiplies exponentially. The fact of having intersatellite links. At this stage, we are still very prudent on our intersatellites. We're taking it a step at a time. First of all, they need to work. Priority number 1, because they are an enabler of capabilities. Second, we are going to prioritize, of course, the ranging to improve our performance times 3 times 4, to do observable ranging between the satellites. We are not going to go very quickly to commanding, because it generates a spread effect of errors. If you do a wrong command, it basically spreads, and you can disable the constellation. This will take it very simple, but we work a lot on telemetry. So at this stage, we are very prudent on the FDIR management. So we are avoiding that ASL generates a propagation of errors in the full constellation, but we're taking all the benefits in terms of observables, ranging and telemetry.
Yeah, thank you. Other questions? Please, George. Thank you for being far from Jose. Next question has to be from back there.
Hi, the first question is for NavIC. Is there current plan? What's your current plan for the second generation? Like how many satellites going to be built? Is there a launch schedule, or are those still TBD?
Yeah, our primary target is to complete the current constellation, the NVS series, what we call, by second quarter of 25.
Okay, thank you. My second question is for QZSS. For the Madoka PPP service, I think you mentioned you provide the correction message for different navigation satellite. Are they including, not of course for QZS, what other constellation you're providing those information, like just for GPS or Galileo or anything else?
Okay, your question means Madoka PPP augmentation satellite? Okay, wait a minute. I don't remember. Augmented constellation, the QZSS, GPS, Galileo, and GLONASS now, and QZSS L1CA, L2C, L5, L1C. Also, GPS is the same, and the other L1P and L2P, and Galileo L1B, L5A. GLONASS is G1CA, G2CA, G1P, G2P is our augmented constellation signals.
Thank you very much. And also, will those information provided through internet also, like the HAS?
Excuse me, pardon me?
Those correction messages, other than coming from satellite, will it also be available through internet? We provide not only from the satellite, but also provide from the internet. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think people are shy, so I make myself one. GPS for Mr. De La Pena. One of those slides, it was very impressive to show that some of the oldest satellites are like 26 years, which is just great. Yeah. But on the other hand, you have also some of the GPS-3 satellites on ground, right? And satellites are not meant to be on the ground, are meant to be flying. So what do you think about that? Also, because they wear out, right, to some degree by being on the ground. Why not launching them?
All right, I'm going to answer the last question first. The Space Force was established in 2019 as a separate service with the primary mission to pivot the DoD space architecture from a peacetime architecture into an architecture that, if required, could conduct offensive and defensive missions in space. Those offensive and defensive capabilities have been under development for the past at least 4 years, some of them longer. And when they're ready, they get the priority for launch. If our intent is to be able to protect our on-orbit architecture, that includes the protection of our trusted allies and our trusted industry providers, then launching those capabilities have been getting the priority, which is why you see we have been taking some measured risk on healthy constellations like GPS. From a business perspective, I think that's going to be the model. I think at least from the DoD's perspective, when we enter into a block production run, the economic analysis says get those satellites built as fast as you can. Buy materials in bulk. Keep the workforce at a high tempo and manned at a high level for experience and expertise, and get those satellites built as fast as you can, because the cost for storage is pretty insignificant compared to extending the production line to marry up the production and the launch. So I think you'll see that not only in GPS, but in other mission areas, like my other mission area, like Milseka. For every time we decide intentionally to delay a launch in any mission area, we do the full-up availability analysis. That says at what point, based on design life, based on actuals, does the constellation get below an unacceptable level that's going to now impact our availability to support missions around the world. And I will tell you, we are above that line, and we won't go below it. So there is margin in our current production runs, which is why those vehicles are in storage. And the fact that they're not meant to be in storage, well, that's just the cost of doing business. Today, when we first built those satellites, everything got synchronized. Hey, they're going to roll out the production line on this day, and then in the next couple of months, we're going to ship it to the pad. That's not the case. And so as a result, we do periodic checks on things we never do periodic checks before. Like we got to go in and make sure the batteries are still okay. And so that's part of the storage fee. They just don't sit in storage. They get system checks to include battery checks periodically, like once a month, and that's part of the business doing storage. So I think that's going to be the business model for us, based on what we're doing on other areas of the Space Force and trying to get our architecture more robust so that it can defend itself. But that's a great question.
Thank you very much. Since I'm in control of the microphone, I'll go with another one. Just for the interest, in one of your slides you were mentioning NTS-3 GEO. Have you explored the possibility of having an NTS-4 one day in any other orbit?
So NTS-3 is an experiment. It's a prototype. By definition, it didn't go through the full, like what I call mission assurance, missionization for encryption, for cybersecurity, because it's a prototype. Depending on the success of that experiment in GEO next year, if there is a decision, which high probability we will consider it, to expand our PNT constellation into GEO, then now we have to evolve that prototype into an operational capability. So it's going to go through all the NSA certification, all the encryption, all the mission assurance. Those prototypes are built with a very short design life, like less than 5 years, because they're a prototype. For GEO, we may change that. For the push into proliferated LEO, which is the two ends of where we're going to grow. Right? Our entire U.S. constellation is in medium Earth orbit. We are exploring experiments in GEO with NTS-3, with potential follow-ons in GEO, and they probably won't be an NTS-4 or 5. They'll be GPS GEO for the United States. And then at the same time, we're also exploring proliferated LEO with the Space Development Agency as the hosted payload in Tranche 2. Those payloads by design are going to be lighter, less power, shorter design lives. I mean, most of the proliferated LEO constellations, they've got less than 5-year design life because the turnover technology is going to require just continuous insertion of new capabilities. So that's why those all are going to be structured for evolution of capability. That's probably the best answer I can give you at this point.
I will augment that just briefly. I'm the principal investigator for NTS-3. So as Mr. De La Pena said, NTS-3 is an experiment. It's not an operational capability yet. Depending on the success of the experiment, the Space Force will make those decisions as to whether there would ever be an NTS-4, NTS-5. That's going to depend on the new technologies that we see coming down the pipeline. The Air Force Research Lab is certainly paying attention to those, and if there are new technologies that actually require an experiment as opposed to just putting them on one of the other satellites that's available in LEO or elsewhere and taking that risk, then we'll step up and we'll develop that. But we will not be doing that in a vacuum. We'll be working with our Space Force partners, as the need evolves.
Thanks for the assist there. And a ground rule for any question coming to me, if you're in the audience from the labs or from aerospace, and you can answer that question better than me, you got the green light to the answer it. Thanks.
Question from Bernd in the back there.
Bernd Eisfeller, University of the Federal Armed Forces in Munich. I have also a question to Mr. Lapena. So what are your plans with respect to LEO PNT in the low Earth orbit? So there was this blackjack program of the DARPA where two navigation payloads with optical subsystems are developed. Can you outline a little bit what is going on there? Thank you.
So this is someone from DARPA. That DARPA initiative isn't an Air Force Space Force program, so I cannot speak with any confidence on any DARPA program. But just to reiterate, for proliferated LEO, Space Development Agency is a Space Force acquisition organization, and we are lockstep with Derek Tournier's effort to develop that hosted payload, which is a PNT payload on this Tranche 2, and that's going to be our pivot into proliferated LEO. And I won't do any DARPA explanation any justice, so I'm sorry, I can't answer that one. Anyone here from DARPA? Yeah, so I can answer for the Space Force. I cannot speak for the DARPA organization.
I have a couple questions for Dr. Shura. You mentioned that a new next-generation satellite that includes the capability to broadcast at 1575 megahertz was launched this year. Is that satellite actually broadcasting that signal today?
L1 signal is...
Yes.
Yes, it is there. It's already broadcasting, but only one satellite, which is launched. And all performance evaluations we have completed, and the alert flag is removed, and system is operational.
Yeah.
But basically, we can utilize for timing services, position services. We have to have another minimum 4 more satellites to come out.
Yeah, thank you. And my second question is, you mentioned you're working on an indigenous clock capability. Is there a certain technology that you're focusing on, like rubidium, or is this more broadly looking at different technologies that you may put on your future spacecraft?
Yeah, right now, NVS-01 is operational with our indigenous RAS, rubidium RAS. So we have seen the performance. It is it's on par with any other clocks what we have in the procured site. And it is the last 3 months it is going on, and the drift, stability, everything is as per the specifications what we have.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And other types also, like hydrogen measure kind of things. The developments are in the pipeline. People are working towards that.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Thank you. Other questions from the audience, please? More questions from us then. Miguel and Eric, when you present your impressive PPP results, is there a certain signal pair that's considered the baseline for your PPP service when you show performance like that? Is it E1OS and E6 or something other pairing?
Yeah, it's E6, and the plots I think are plotting GPS combined with Galileo. It's the dual PPP configuration. I think we get more or less the same with Galileo standalone, but the availability is obviously far lower. In terms of accuracy, we converge to the same levels pretty much.
And you're sending today then corrections for which specific signals from Galileo and GPS?
E1 and E6 and GPS L1 and I have to check. And we also broadcast through the internet the corrections. Yes.
The same set of ones as the satellites?
Yeah.
No, thank you. Joanna, please.
Yes, a question for members from Japan and Korea and India. We know the U.S. is exploring and Europe is already starting to implement some level of reprogrammability on their satellites. Is that something that your systems are looking at or implementing?
The question, I think you directed it for everyone but U.S. and Europe, right? So the question was, the payloads on the spacecraft today, reprogrammability, the ability to change signals and other things with hardware on the spacecraft, software-defined radios or such things, is that being looked at within your programs? And perhaps we could start with you, with Mr. Kishimoto.
Now, developing QZSS 5 to 7, and this satellite can change L1CA to L1CB or from L1CB to L1CA, but not is a data payload. So from 2, 3, 4 hour replacement from these satellites, we are now considering some data payload includes. Now we're planning.
Thank you. And same question, Mr. Kim.
Yes. As I mentioned, KPS program is just beginning stages. So we just finished the SDR last June. So we will consider the new technology or several functions after that.
And Dr. Schur, please.
Yeah, actually, the programmability in payload right now not existing in our existing spacecrafts, but the power sharings and other kind of small flexibilities are existing. But in the future, of course, it is one of the major area of development for having multiple frequencies in the same payload, which is programmable. So that action is there existing on our design engineers right now. Thank you.
I'll try to shake a bit so that people wake up a bit.
Yeah, there is a question in the back.
Okay. Otherwise,
you go ahead.
I have a question about the notice advisories of the constellations. Is there currently, I think the notice advisories of different constellations are issued over internet, basically. That's where we get them from. Is there a plan to, in future, broadcast the notice advisories as part of some kind of navigation data, almanac or somewhere? And my second question is particularly for NavIC and BIDO, where can we find the notice advisories for those constellations?
Yeah, your second question is to NavIC and BDO. So NavIC, we have got the advisory developed and deployed for our internal evaluation within ISRO, and even the latest satellites, NVS-01, also been inducted into the advisory. To release to the public, we are looking for correct timing with our management. We have to discuss and finalize when we have to release to the public, and you can expect within maybe within this year itself this advisory release.
Anyone else want to answer that?
Just maybe on the question that was asked before, for the time being, we don't have any such plan to broadcast through the air such data. That's not in our plan. But that's an interesting question, and I think it's maybe food for thought.
Other questions? Jose, certainly you have some.
Yeah, I had a provocative one, so I'm sorry, Mr. De La Pena, to come back to you, but it's just to shake the audience and hopefully. I think I heard Galileo second generation is thinking of ISL for navigation purposes of a navigation mission. GPS has been used in ISL, but not for navigation mission in the past. Are you not afraid of being left behind if they do it and you don't do it in the future?
Yeah, can you repeat
that?
Crosslinks.
The question is being considered for GPS.
Crosslinks.
Crosslinks, yes, you call them crosslinks, right? Yeah,
sure. I think all of those techniques, I think, are all great ideas. I think that if I could get better clocks, I mean, over half of our error we can attribute to the timing. I think most folks talk here about experimenting in clocks. You know, we continue to experiment in clocks. I think better clocks are a great idea. I think crosslinks are also a great idea. We have funded with one of our industry partners a study. We've got SWAP on several of our space vehicles that haven't launched yet or are scheduled to launch have some additional available SWAP. And so we're looking at how to do some experimentation for our PNT constellation, how we would implement and integrate that whole crosslink concept internal to the constellation. And then, because in my other hat, I'm also the MilSatCom PNT, I'm also the MilSatCom PO. The DoD is also looking at how do we just move data? How do we move data as part of a data transport layer in space? And so we're looking at those options as well as to how we cross-link data between orbits, between different constellations. So I think those are all great ideas. I think, you know, as much as we can learn for any of my international partners here at the table, if they have moved out on that, if they've got data, if they've got designs that we can leverage, to me that falls in our mantra of that we can, is that, you know, we're going to exploit what we can get our hands on, so we don't have to start over. So all those ideas are great ideas, all of them. But when we had our reverse industry day for PNT back in June, I mean, we looked at all that stuff, and there is a list of those efforts that we're moving out on, and crosslinks on our existing satellites are one of them.
And on the topic of provocative questions, this one's from Francisco for Eric and Miguel. But can you talk about the non-European launch opportunities and any possibilities?
Yeah, there's not a lot to say, but indeed, as I said, the situation with Ariane delays really makes that we are looking into these options. We've been in touch with US, obviously, with Japan as well. There are several options that we have been considering. We are coming to a point, very close point, where we are starting government-to-government negotiations. We are waiting in the next 10 days, more or less, a formal mandate from our member states to go ahead with such negotiations. And then once we do this, we will dig into the final stages of negotiations. A number of preparatory talks have already taken place. And in a couple of weeks, there are already planned negotiation sessions, notably with the US. So that's where we stand. Obviously, we'll be able to share more once we have progressed on these government-to-government talks. But that's what I can cover today.
Yeah, thank you. And Rick, another question, please.
So I think we know from GPS from Mr. De La Pena that OCX is the main thing on his mind right now, and it sounds like maybe the Galileo is launch schedule is probably your principal thing. But from the other constellations and representatives, what is the major thing that's worrying you or focusing your attention right now?
Biggest concerns, and let's start from the other side this time, Dr. Shura. What is your biggest concern or thing that's occupying most of your time now in trying to improve NavIC?
Yeah,
what I understand is how we are occupied with the major activities for improving NavIC, right? The question?
Yeah, so each program has something that right now is a focal point just because it's the next big thing for your program. So what is really for NavIC right now, when you have meetings, what are most of your meetings on? Is there one topic or is it a very, very broad set of topics?
Okay, basically the important program aspects right now running is NavIC is, of course, our fundamental requirement is to establish the base layer constellation of 7 satellites. So we have got expansion plans for increasing the coverage area. So we are looking for different options for increasing the coverage area. Probably maybe the higher latitudes also is in pipeline. So we are evaluating different types of constellations, whether expansion the GeoArc itself or some other way we can get this performance for the required users, how to increase the coverage. That is one part. The other one is, as I explained earlier, the message authentication we have to put in line, and also we have to have the key transfer mechanisms for restricted services, and definitely we have to include performance standard to be brought out for a wider community to use that, and interoperability has to be ensured for L1 signals, whatever is put up now. And the pipeline we are thinking about having additional a few signals in the system what is coming up. So this way we have charted out our plans for NavIC, and in the ground segment also how to utilize the receivers, how to make it a mass production point of view such that it is being well utilized. So we have got a pipeline of activities being written down for how to do it. Thank you.
And just moving across the table, Mr. De La Peña, was he right that OCX is forefront in your mind, I guess, of the program, or is there anything else that's a concern?
So any program that's been rebaselined, gone through a number of credit recertification, as you get to the end game, it takes a lot of effort just to close. Right? In any military operation, the last tactical mile is always the hardest, and that's where I am with this program. But I think in the future, I think the concern that I would share with all of you is that I think we are in a intense competition for talent to continue to develop the space capabilities that we need for the future. I can't tell you the number of contracts over the past 3 years that we've awarded, the United States government Space Force has awarded, and the winning vendor can't meet the manning profile, and now you're 6 months into the contract. I've got other programs that about as complex as you could get for the space business, and that program and with that contractor passes like a PDR, and the lead engineer gets an offer from Amazon that triples his salary, and he's gone. I think it's going to be cutthroat for the level of talent, because at this stage of space development in modernization of these new capabilities, we're going up against private industry with deeper pockets than the Department of Defense, to be quite honest, for talent. I mean, so in the support to the government, whether that's the Department of Defense or the civil community, all we've got to retain our talent is the intrinsic motivation to defend the nation and provide support to the nation. And for those who that's not enough, we are just losing talent left and right. I don't know if you work for a company. If you think, I mean, if you're a company and you're meeting 100% of your talent goals, tell me the secret how to go do that. but I think in our business, it's exploding. Artificial intelligence and machine learning across the board will apply to every single business out there. Satellite business just being one of many. Supercomputing and data will apply to every business area. The space business is one of many, and I think how we retain our talent, I think we need a joint strategy internationally and government and industry. Because if not, then the clock is ticking on whether or not we're going to be able to do things that we need to do.
That's a fascinating comment. Just yesterday, I don't know if Professor Jade Morton's in the room, but she convened kind of a meeting of academia, industry, and other groups talking about talent pool and what the university should be doing to grooming the next generation of P&T engineers. So if you have any thoughts on that, which it sounds like you do, you might want to speak with her, because she is trying to organize an informal group of ION members to understand better what needs to be done to train, especially in universities. Eric and Miguel, any top concerns for you, aside from Jose's next question?
Yeah, I think in a program like Galileo, there are different time frames that for which you have important or top priorities. So if we look at Galileo for the short term, priorities are clearly the launches I mentioned, our PRS signal and declaration that we are working against really as our top priority in terms of service milestone, and OSNMA in January. So those things are the files that occupy a lot of the teams on a daily basis. But then we have longer term also priorities, and everything that will happen in Galileo in 5, 10, 15 years is something that needs also our efforts now in terms of building proposals, building strategy, where do we want to go, collecting the data, bringing also starting planning budgetary aspects. And we start doing this, we start preparing what's coming next in G2, and Miguel can explain a bit this, but also beyond G2, the LEO PNT activities that we'll have to start in the next financial framework. All those things are also topics that are quite high in our agenda, because we need to anticipate so much decisions that are quite heavy with political layers and so on. So that's also one of our top priorities for the time.
Yeah, and the non-technical side, I think it's important to mention. We have changed, at least in Galileo, we are doing a big effort in 2016 to change the way of developing satellite systems. It used to be the case in PNT that you do ICD, then you start building, you do a first launch, you do a constellation, and 20 years after you think about changing the ICD. Since 2016 we are working a dynamic process. We are working a process where the ICD, due to the capabilities of the satellites in the future, is able to evolve the ground segment. We are moving to releases per year on ground segment and also in space. Of course, we have to maintain most of the legacy services, but we have additional capabilities to move forward. And this has been the most difficult thing in the last 5 years, that people change the mindset of fixing everything, doing a PDR, and then you forget for 2 generations. And now we have basically virtual PDRs and CDRs on a continuous basis in order to see the development. The teams of testing have a starting scene in space and a range of possibilities for the future. And these mindsets allow us to get closer to what I call the terrestrial PNT time of execution, because the space PNT cannot afford for a full constellation to die before you put new services, and either we adapt or we die. And we are trying this, and it's not easy. It's to change all the procedures of space agencies and so on, but it's starting to converge. And I think this will be the main challenge the next 10 years, that the satellite development processes, through low-cost, shorter development timeframes, or or faster release systems for the big systems, is adapting to the terrestrial timeframes.
Yes, we have several issues. The first is experience, because Korea has several heritage regarding development of Earth observation satellites. However, although we had developed SPAS system, but the KPS program is our first satellite navigation program. So we are focusing on develop our technology regarding satellite navigation system. And other issue is
compatibility and interoperability. This is we are like a beginner in the satellite navigation area. So to harmonize our system with other GNSS, we should enhance compatibility and interoperability with other satellite systems. So we are ongoing. We are cooperating with other countries such as U.S., EU, Japan, or etc.
Thank you. And Mr. Kishimoto, concerns or issues that occupy your time in Japan?
And in Japan, highest priority is to establish 7 constellation, but the issue to this is like the launch vehicle. So we want to launch 2023 or 2024, but it depends on the A3 launch vehicle. But A3 launch vehicle test flight 1 was held, unfortunately, this year, probably February or March. So the next test flight is very important for us. And the 7 constellation is minimum constellation for regional, we think. So I would like to establish more from 7 to 11. So as soon as after establish the 7 constellation.
Thank you. And just actually a couple questions on your 11th satellite expansion. First, was there some performance requirements driving going from 7 to 11? What benefits do you see from adding 4 satellites? And the second is, I don't believe your schedules went beyond the 7 satellite deployment. Is there a notional timeline for when the 8th through 11th satellites would be launched?
The former question is more satellites, the dot improves, so the PNT accuracy will improve, but the PS document will be published a few years future. And the second question.
But on that one, was there a dot threshold they were looking for, or are you just trying to balance improved performance with a realistic budget for the program?
Yes, okay. It is very, very important for us, and we are thinking that 2 satellites in the same orbital plane, so we'd like to dual launch to the orbit, to the QZO orbit, and once launch. So it is better cost than before. So we'd like this such a method where we go advanced like this.
And then on the schedule, then?
Schedule. On the schedule is a very important question. And there's some restriction of the budget or manufacturing resource. The 11th satellite constellation will be established probably late 2030. We think. Now we are investigating.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Now, Brad, with a question. Oh, you have one in the back first, and then Brad next.
Good morning, and thank you for these interesting presentations on the system update. I have a provocative question for our EU Galileo representatives. So in Galileo 2nd generation, there is an explosion of new services and new features, and also in particular for the PRS. And these new services are oftentimes the drivers for technology push, especially on the space segment side. On the other hand, this implies also on the user community side some challenges for the receiver manufacturers and for the user community in general. How can you ensure that the user community is on board, that the manufacturers are on board to support in the future these new services?
Okay, I think it's a very interesting question, and just a bit of a genesis on how we proceeded on G2. I think the original thrust on G2 was really service-oriented, and we did really extensive consultations of member states, user communities, users, receiver manufacturers to understand what is it that we don't deliver in G1 that would be required to support emerging application markets and so on in G2. So I think this top-down work was at the center of G2. So the service portfolio that we have seen, I think it's strongly fed by this consultation. So it's anchored in an actual need that is confirmed by EU SPA in daily contacts with the user communities. Now, it doesn't mean it's not a challenge, but I wouldn't say it's techno-push. What I think Miguel will cover and can expand on is that on top of this top-down element, I think there's a need when you build a new generation system that will be there for the next decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, to have also techno evolutions introduced into the design to be able to continue addressing these user needs throughout the lifetime of the system, as Miguel was pointing in his presentation. So I wouldn't say it's techno-push. It's really to introduce sufficient techno vision forward to be able to continue coping with the user demand. And to come to your last point on the user segment, yes, it's a challenge. What we have seen is a lot of agility of this sector to really accommodate, anticipate, even have products that have growth capabilities that are such that they can take on board many of the new features we are introducing. And we see also that for many communities, not all of them, if we look at safety of life, they have very long cycles for their products, but the vast majority of products now have really short lifetime and also flexible software design that can accommodate a lot. So I think so far we have not received really negative feedback from the receiver manufacturers or the chipset manufacturers. I think it's more a matter of planning on their side in which release of their chipset or their receiver they will fit which service or which new features we bring. So they will face this in their own product lines, and this depends on each manufacturer. But in terms of taking on board and trying to sell receivers that can take on board those new features, I think we have really a very good feedback and very good adoption from manufacturers.
Eric covered most of it. Thank you, Diana, for the question. From a technical point of view, it's not techno-push, it's techno-survival, like I will call it, more than techno-push. When we started designing in 2001, we had the first PDR of G1, Galileo first generation. We had a non-flexible system. It was flexible, as was demonstrated this morning, but it was non-flexible. It has basically zero flexibility at technical level on the signal generation, and we have 500 bits per second, extra capacity. And it was supposed to last 20 years. Then they came all the apples after apples on our heads, and we were squeezing 0.5 dBs, only 5, to get this marvelous quasi-pilot that is tested now. We were squeezing INAV data and so on to make time to first fix, time to acquisition and so on. But we were really playing with the margins, and we realized in 16, 17 that it will get even worse, because the period of the first 20 years was a period of not so much evolution of PNT. Now it's really exponential. So we had to build in the capacity. At technical level, it's not a techno-push. I call it techno-survival. We need to be able to accommodate your ideas if possible, in 12 to 18 months implementation time, end-to-end, into the constellation. The biggest issues is the technicalities, of course, is that we have to basically virtualize two systems. We need to keep a set of signal system services that are operationally providing service unaffected, with a separate set of signals where you can validate new capabilities. And about the users, I always have the same rule. If it is good, they will implement it. So if we are good, you will implement it. So the threshold for the user is very simple. Either it's useful or not.
Thank you. Brad? Good morning. I guess it's still morning. This is sort of for you, Mr. De La Peña. It turns out my background went all the way back to OCX before it ever even quite got going. I went and did an in-depth review of OCX and concluded that maybe the remark you made was not only very cogent in terms of people and competence, but that it had extended all the way back. My takeaway from that OCX review, and I apologize if there's somebody from that contractor here, was you didn't have the first team on that in terms of software, and it was going to head into one heck of a lot of trouble. Fast forward, we're going to build satellites, and the procurement people, the contracts people, the green eye shade people, they want us to push those right on through and then get that workforce off the payroll. I contend that really flies in the face of what you're trying to do in terms of preserving competence. Because what you're forcing that contractor to do is build up his workforce, bring it along, chop it off, and then all of a sudden there's this death knell, this bathtub of no talent. And by and large, if you've been fired from an organization or let go or whatever, your tendency to want to go back, given that pain, is pretty limited. And I understand you're under boundary conditions that I can't even imagine in terms of what you have to do. But I would contend that there is a paradox in trying to squirt all those satellites out and then save all that money, but then 5 years later say, wait a minute, where'd the workforce go? During World War II, of course, different situation. If you watch the aircraft manufacturers, they were going through A model, B model, C model, D model, one right after another. They were all lined up. Of course, it was a different time, different boundary conditions, but different incentives. But I don't know if you'd like to comment. I'm putting you in the hot seat here because I can just barely perceive the boundary conditions and forces that are operating on you to quickly build it and get that budget down versus your interest in sustaining a workforce. So I don't know if you've got comments about that.
Yes, sir, I do. I'm going to answer the OCX question first, and then I'll talk about doing things differently. So for OCX, in order to converge on the schedule this past 10 months, the first thing the contractor did was shift an enormous amount of talent back into the program. They doubled the software engineers. They offered company incentives, like top dollar company incentives for the top engineers on other elements of their program to roll into OCX. They also offered incentives for folks who had left the company, either not working for somebody else or retired. Offered intense incentives with very targeted, and they were able to secure those people coming back to the program. To increase capacity, that contractor invested corporate funds to expand the test resources so we can have higher talent with higher throughput, and that has helped save the schedule to the point where it's not going to slip anymore. So that's a decision that the government and a lead prime contractor have to make. Because when a contractor says, we're going to go pull talent to go support your program, where do you think they get them? Right? So that is a risk discussion across our entire Space Systems Command acquisition leadership agreed with that approach because that talent was going to be taken from other parts of the company supporting other space programs or other DoD programs. And leadership got behind it because OCX has to go. So in the future, how do we learn from programs that have struggled? Whether it's OCX, GPS-3 was in 2011 through 2012. That program struggled. Didn't go through McCurdy, but he got rebaselined a couple of times. And this concept of how do we ensure that we keep the talent engaged. So in the future, you're going to see a much different architecture and acquisition approach for DoD space programs. First is systems are going to be smaller. They're going to be open so that we can refresh capabilities. We talk about things like software reprogrammability for both the space vehicles and the terminal. I'm talking about Space Force acquisition programs. We're going to restructure our acquisition approach so that we are buying smaller satellites with shorter lifespans with open software for both the space vehicle and terminal so that we can turn new capabilities inside of 5 years. In order to get there, you're going to see a different shift with a priority on prototypes and experimentation. Not only with our own internal government labs, but you'll see acquisition strategies when technology is mature enough. Before we award these big development contracts, we're going to invest in sharing multiple vendors to prototype that new capability to drive down the highest risk areas that we think need to get taken care of before we can actually sign a contract with anybody. And a new satellite in particular can be put on contract and delivered from day 0 to day 5 years. That's the goal. So upfront prototyping, we're going to carry multiple vendors deep into acquisition, probably past CDR, and we've done that on a couple of these programs. And then once we buy down all the risk, those prototype programs will be structured so that it is a linear growth to the full capability, not 5 years of experimentation, and then there's a whole new set of risks that we're going to introduce into the follow-on acquisition program. We are moving seriously to change that acquisition approach. So Dr. Parkinson, that's kind of where we are right now. That's Mr. Calvelli's push to restructure what we buy so we can buy it in lower risk, lower NRE. But with that comes a commitment and an investment to experiment and drive down as much for the prototyping as much risk as we possibly can. And those new capabilities will not leave the prototyping phase until they're mature enough that we have, with some confidence, and Mr. Calvelli is all about fixed price contracts. We did the NRO. That we can enter an agreement with our niche partner with confidence that we can sign a fixed price contract that enough risk is burned down and requirements are defined well enough so we can both agree to a fixed price arrangement and deliver within 5 years. And with that, if we're cranking out new capabilities both on the space vehicle side and on the ground and in the user equipment every 5 years, there is a constant refresh of capability that keeps the talent engaged. Right. I don't think U.S. or our international partners here at the table, I don't think there's any of us are thinking about we're going to reach a point where we're done launching satellites. I don't think we're ever going to be done. The challenge is how do we continue to leverage all of the investments in the commercial side so that we're only really, from the government side, we're only really investing on the exquisite government capabilities that we need for government purposes. So that's probably the best answer I have for you, but that's where we're thinking as of today.
In my opinion, that was an outstanding answer. And so there is a loud round of applause coming from me for what you said. And I hope that the system allows you to do what you just described, because I think you're on a great track.
Yeah, so thanks. And then just one additional thought that I'd like to make with this group is that we, the government, I'm talking about the U.S. government, we need credible proposals from our industry partners. Credible. Every program that I've worked, I got in trouble, and I've worked my share of them. Right? It kind of goes back to two things. One is that the baseline was never right, ever. And if it's a competitive solicitation, that means we, the government, thought we had criteria to determine whether or not there's a floor of capability, and a floor schedule, and a floor minimum viable product. And programs that get in trouble, I find, have never gotten that right, OCX included. If we give you a proposal and you understand, and you take a look at our selection criteria, you take a look at our draft contract, you take a look at our draft technical requirements document, and you don't think you can sign up to it, tell us that. Don't sign up to it. If you think our criteria isn't comprehensive enough to really drive out what the real critical differentiating factors are and establishes a real floor, tell us about it. But what we can't do is we go through source selections in the government, one, because they take a long time, because I got lawyers who advise me that every solicitation that I'm going to be a decision maker on, industry is going to protest me, and I got to be ready to go to court. Right? I can't tell you the number of times that we go through the technical evaluation, had it documented. You take that times, multiply it by 3. That's what long it takes to get the lawyers to ensure the documentation will stand up in court. All I'm saying is that in the future, if you want to move fast, getting the source selections and the solicitations right is a big part of that equation. I can't afford in the future. Mr. Cadillac wants us to field from prototype, finish prototyping, and award a contract in 5 years. I can't spend a year and a half getting on contract. Neither can you. And that's what causes breaks, because we're waiting for new work. I can't tell you the number of times contractors come and talk to me and go, hey, we're getting ready. We're leaning in for that new work that we just give a bid on. But we got guys we can't keep on the payroll anymore because we didn't anticipate being in source selection for 2 years. So neither did we. So credibility in proposals is really something that we can improve together. And if we don't get it right, please tell me about it.
Just to tack on to Brad's question, I guess maybe think about the situation in Europe where you went from one prime with OHB to now, as I understand it, have a couple different primes building different satellites. Any comments, I guess, on the acquisition process or lessons learned that you care to share?
Similar constraints we had. We changed the approach of the procurement. As you see, we have now 30 procurements for the second generation. And each of them had different constraints. On the satellite side, of course, was the importance of this ambitious second generation led us to dual sourcing for this case. We still struggle the same. We are trying to improve, and we are improving on these 1.5 years of procurement cycle and to get them shorter. What we do now is we stagger them a lot, the procurements. We break the big concepts like OCX, for example. We break it from the beginning in 3-4 phases, and we interleave them. So we are starting the solicitation or acquisition process of the next one while we are deploying the first one. And this allows a bridge of know-how because there is a continuous process. But it's it's always a difficult subject. You can go from a single contract on covering a very wide set of areas to 4 or 5 very dedicated, but then you need to multiply your effort in the intermanagement of these activities. But at the end, it gives you flexibility. We have been able to reduce by 15% the cost ratios on these procurements compared to the previous years because of the fragmentation and the staggerness.
Maybe just to add a caveat to some of these is that dual sourcing is possible under some circumstances, but it's not something that we can generalize because the sheer amount that this represents is becoming a problem. So we have really to focus the programmatic decisions on what do we do in 2 or 3 sources because we bet that in the next phase where we buy bulk, then this will be important, or this will de-risk, the provisioning of key parts of the system in the long term. But obviously, we won't be able to continue doing dual sources on all lines of satellites we build from this point on. So this was really a decision that is heavy financially, but de-risk and opens really competitive advantage for the next phase. And it's really a tricky decision that we have to take for each of these major investments decisions.
Looking at the clock, I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions, if anyone else wants to take advantage of the very distinguished group we have up here. And if not, selfishly thinking of the very long lines in the buffet at the exhibition hall, we could sneak out before all the other sessions and eat all the food. Let's do that. Let me thank very much all of you for your presentations and participation in this discussion. And thank you to the audience for all the great questions. There is a buffet lunch in the exhibition hall, and if you haven't been there in the past, you do want to run down there and get in line before everyone else. So I look forward to seeing you down there. Thank you again. The session is closed. And again, thank you very much.